Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Wow, can you believe that the year is almost over? Well, it is. It is Monday, December 29th, 2019 at 7:07 in the morning. Welcome to Radio Westchester. This is the radio station at the train station. Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. The weather's not too nice, though, as we come towards the end of the year. It's 41 degrees right now. It's not going to get up much higher than 43, but we're going to have rain all day. And indeed, that is our top story today. Or perhaps it's the Rockland sheriff raises concerns over New York's new bail law after the Muncie stabbing. Although the family and now others are coming forward and saying this person's not a terrorist, he is a very mentally ill person. Nonetheless, concerns are everywhere over anti-Semitic violence. 2 are dead and 1 is hurt in a shooting in a church near Fort Worth, Texas. 1 is dead after a plane headed to Westchester Airport crashed in Maryland, and 4 million are under a flood watch throughout the rest of the country. In sports, the Giants lose, the Jets win, the Islanders win, even the Devils won yesterday. Wasn't a bad day for New York teams, except, well, the Giants had their problems. We'll be right back with the full weather. Welcome to Radio Westchester. Welcome to the program once again. The weather, though, is a concern. And as you know, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle. United Hebrew voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. We'll have periods of rain off and on today with pockets of heavier downpours. Chance for slippery spots north of I-84, but at this time, this is less of a concern than it was yesterday. The winds out of the east, 15 to 25 miles an hour. Now, tonight, more rain showers, although they end towards midnight. The chance for icy conditions, please pay attention. Along the north of I-84, cloudy and chilly with lows around 37 degrees. Going to be colder north of 287 now. We can't stress that enough. And beware of icy conditions after all this rain. And as we get into Tuesday, New Year's Eve, partly sunny, highs around 44, normal high 37. That should make it a little more comfortable because as we get into Tuesday night, New Year's Eve, it'll be partly cloudy, chance of a stray flurry, but it will chill down to about 32, not much below that though. So you should be okay if you're up in White Plains or down in the city celebrating the ball drop. On Wednesday, your true first day of the new year, a mix of sun and clouds. The high will be 39 degrees. The overnight low will be 28. And on Thursday, mostly sunny skies. The high will be 45 degrees. The overnight low will be 34. And again, that's the weather brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. The top of the hour this morning is also brought to you by Aging Issues Management, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-In Virtual Reality. Let's get to those stories now. Pardon me. Now, as you know, the Muncie stabbing, it has the community shaken. A machete-wielding man's late-night attack on a rabbi's holiday party turned a normally joyful Hanukkah season into one of terror for the Muncie community, still shaken by last month's brutal stabbing near a synagogue. The arrest of an Orange County man Sunday morning was just like everybody else, people said. The arrest of an Orange County man Sunday morning in the attack has fueled speculation about the motive. But now we've learned over the last several hours that the man is suffering from schizophrenia. And indeed, now if this is being labeled a mental illness crime rather than one of domestic terrorism, nonetheless, the fact that it was a copycat kind of a thing has people concerned nonetheless. And Rockland County Sheriff Louis Falco urged Governor Andrew Cuomo on Sunday to reconsider a new law that limits cash bail in certain cases involving even hate crimes just hours after 5 people were stabbed in an anti-Semitic attack. This in Lohud this morning. Falco, a Democrat, made the comments with the Democratic governor at his side as they all condemned the Saturday night violence. The controversial bail reform, set to take effect January 1 but already being implemented, will end cash bail for misdemeanors and many other nonviolent felons. But it will not happen in the Monty case. Greenwood Lake resident Grafton Thomas, 37, was ordered held on $5 million bail Sunday after he was arraigned on 5 counts of attempted murder. Well, it's kind of shocking that we had so many news stories, particularly news stories on the web. That's why, please, folks, stay away from Facebook when these crimes happen. A lot of people had this guy walking out after he did what he did. This story is out of Texas, but it involves violence, and once again, it makes one wonder about us. Although there's a twist to this story, and it's out of News 12 and the Associated Press this morning. Congregants returned fire and fatally shot a gunman who killed at least one person in a church near Fort Worth, Texas on Sunday. Indeed, that's the twist. Some of the people in church had their own guns. A second parishioner has life-threatening injuries following the attack at the West Freeway Church of Christ. White Settlement Police Department Chief J.B. Bevering, and White Settlement, by the way, is the name of the town. White Settlement Police Department Chief J.B. Bevering said during a news conference Sunday that the assailant fired once before the heroic actions of the congregants cut his assault short. And the chief went on to say, unfortunately, this country has seen so many of these that we've actually gotten used to it at this point. An elder at the church told the New York Times that one of those killed was a security guard who responded to the shooter, calling him a dear friend. It is 7:15. This out of Lohud this morning. A small plane crashed in Maryland, in the Maryland suburbs of the nation's capital Sunday, hitting a home's carport and killing the lone person aboard the aircraft. The plane came down in the neighborhood of Lanham shortly before 3 p.m., striking the carport and the vehicle before it broke into many pieces. This said Mark Brady, a spokesman for Prince George's County Fire and Emergency Services. The identity of the person killed was withheld pending notification of family members. The home is about 3 miles south of an airport in College Park, Maryland, where the Federal Aviation Administration said the Grumman American AA-5A aircraft from which it departed. The plane was headed to Westchester County Airport in White Plains. And at least 18 homes in the area lost power. Now, weather is affecting many here across the country. From the Dakotas to New England, people are waking up to snow, or in our case, rain. Nearly 25 million people will be under some sort of winter weather alert this morning, according to CNN meteorologist Robert Shackelford. Blizzard warnings are expected to last in the Dakotas and Minnesota through this morning as it heads east. Civil rights icon and Democratic Representative John Lewis revealed Sunday that he is battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he said, I have been in some kind of a fight for freedom, equality, basic human rights. Now I will fight this. Lewis is the last surviving member of the Big Six group of civil rights activists led by the Reverend Martin Luther King in the 60s. And he said he would continue to serve in office while undergoing treatment. And we go to sports this morning. Well, the Jets won again, and that is always a good thing. So they get to look forward to next year with the hope of hopes so that they can continue to turn not their season, but their efforts around as they head into the new millennium. They beat the Bills by a score of 13-6. Meanwhile, the Giants lost to the Eagles, putting the Eagles in the playoffs, and they lost handily 34-17. And all the speculation today is most people think he will their coach, Pat Shurmur, get the gate? We will soon find out. And while we're on football, many of you will enjoy this. The Pats lost at home to the Dolphins, and they faced the playoffs without a first-round bye for the first time since 2009. And they lost with 24 seconds remaining to Miami by a score of 27-24. Am I gloating that the cheating New England team lost? Although Brady, you just got to go with it. He's the best, well, of the old era. We're in a new time now, a new decade, or at least in another 24 hours we will be, or thereabouts. The Islanders won. I was going to say again, but they had a short losing streak that ended. Reinforcing fundamentals paid off for the Islanders. Ryan Pulock and Matt Martin scored less than 2 minutes apart early in the third period as the Islanders rallied to beat the Wild by a score of 3-1. And the Devils won for a change. Even they won. That must be depressing to the Giants. And they defeated, I got it right here. I just had the score. But hey, I saw the end of the game. They defeated Ottawa 4-3 in overtime. And finally, Jack Hughes, their young phenom, who's struggling, and it's tough when you're 18 years old in the National Hockey League, he scored in overtime to give the Devils a much-needed 4-3 win. Their record now 13-19. And we'll go back a day. The Rangers won the other night. They had quite a game against, and I almost forgot who the heck they played. I was all excited about it. But they had quite a game against the, who was it? Well, suffice it to say that they won, and they won handily. Against Toronto Maple Leafs. I got it. And Ryan Strome, who was questionable as a top-end player when they picked him up, is proving to be just that. We're coming up on 7:20, and we probably will hear from our regular guest shortly, Vince Russo. Let's take a look at the lineup. We have today with us Vince Russo in the morning, George Latimer at 7:35, Jake's Picks and Football Conversation. That will take place at 8 o'clock, and Bob Cox will be with us early today, 8:20, another holiday edition of the program. And we will be getting out of Dodge at least around 7:20 as we take care of some other radio business. Now, I need to comment. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but I need to go there. And let's see who's with us. Yes, that's Vince. We'll be with Vince in a moment. In fact, let's say good morning to Vince, and then we'll share this with him. Good morning, Vince Russo. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. New week here. End of the year coming up.
Yes, it is. Don't I look particularly handsome? No, anyway, I'm sorry. You like me. All right.
Well, at least you don't have the ugly sweater on.
You know, it was Christmas. I was supposed to wear an ugly sweater, Weisenheimer. Anyway, this means a lot to me. I know you know this. In fact, you sent me a text when it happened, and many people weighed in, and I have to weigh in because it's particularly personal to me. Now, you know me since I'm a kid, and I loved radio, and I told you 1,000 years ago that one day I would do the radio, and you were always very supportive of it, one of the reasons that you're here now. And as I grew older and wanted to do talk radio, and I knew that I would do it one day when I would leave Wall Street. That was my intention, to one day do it. And when I did, I went back to school, as you know, and was fortunate enough now to have a 15-year so far career at it.
Yep.
But the guy that mixed, and by then that's what he was doing. It was something, it's interesting, that's what Stern does now. But he mixed very serious interviews with intellectually accomplished people, captains of industry, theater, politics, with humor, was Don Imus. And I still remember, and I'm going to quote him since he said it on the air, the first time I remember hearing him, when I was very young, I didn't listen to him in the early 70s. I thought he was too crass and wasn't serious enough for the kind of radio that I felt I would do one day. But I knew he was a shock jock then. And it was around the early 80s to the mid-80s when he started mixing the serious stuff. And the humor got more adult, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And I just became a huge fan. I mean, I listened to Imus every morning From then right on through the day, I got a morning show. And so obviously, and that's now 12 years. So, or just about 12 years. So that I didn't listen the last 12 years. But no one influenced me as much as he did. And I got into that rhythm of mixing riffs with serious interviews and then making comment during. I'll never be as acerbic as he was. I'm just not the same personality. But suffice it to say, he was a big part of why I do what I do, and the fact that I mix it up the way I do. 1 minute being an idiot, which is my primary personality trait, and occasionally actually having a thoughtful conversation. Anyway, I have to admit that when I heard he died the other night, it really hurt. I was surprised at that. I'm not usually affected that way by these performers. But anyway, we did lose Don Imus at 79. I listened to his last show last year. I had it taped. And he was kind of tearful at the end. It was probably tough to walk away from. I did not expect him to die this soon, but I knew that he had some serious health issues from the time he fell off a horse. I don't know if you're aware of it, man. It's 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Fell off a horse, damaged both lungs. He was on oxygen half the time. And you couldn't put him down. He was certainly a Southwesterner. He loved Texas and New Mexico. But I got his humor. And he made some serious mistakes. The mistakes he made with the girls of the basketball team was a tremendous mistake, which he paid. It cost him a lot of money. He made a comeback from that. But a lot of people looking at the post-mortems, the guys who got it right were kind of like Mike Lupica. They said he wasn't perfect. But now in this day of being sure to condemn people who screwed up vis-a-vis the Me Too movement or anything else, now it's fashionable to go and criticize him and Stern and other people. What they don't realize what they're doing is they're criticizing simply the sense of humor of a segment of the population. This was a guy who raised millions for cancer and understood that radio needed to be a mix of things. In fact, the number of people, it was kind of nice to see the number of people who started following Imus after he got serious were former NPR listeners who described NPR, yes, as serious and understated, but also at times pompous, which it is. Not that I don't listen. Anyway, I just had to say this. Don Imus was one of the greatest radio people, and certainly somebody that influenced me. Not that anybody cares what I think, but it really bothered me, and I needed to note it.
Well, see, I think he got a bad rap with that whole thing with the girls. It was said tongue-in-cheek, and he was saying it in an ironic fashion that was kind of mimicking the way people
right. Yes, I understand that.
In the hood,
yes.
talk. And it wasn't meant to be insulting. It was meant to be.
He was channeling an
commentary.
Yeah, he was channeling an attitude, but it still was.
Yeah.
It went too far, and he later admitted it. He apologized for it, and he even changed his program. But again, the point I'm getting at is that was a mistake. It really was. But be that as it may, what I didn't appreciate with some of the people writing was that they criticized the fact that in his era he would make the occasional gay joke because it was de rigueur at the time. He would make, but again, he wasn't. He probably was more. That's the thing. John Imus, as a human being, was a very tolerant guy. What he did was challenge and a very liberal guy socially. But what he did was he would channel the zeitgeist, what was funny, what was not, or in defense of it. And it was damn right funny. I mean, he made fun of people. He made fun of people doing drugs. I can't. When I interviewed twice in person Dwight Gooden, I kept thinking of the Dwight Gooden character on Imus when he say Imus. I got a $20,000 rosin bag, stuff like that. Or he made fun. Now it was a gay joke. Okay, and times have changed, and even my background, my best friend in high school was gay. I mean, and I shouldn't even have to say that, but you have to today. But yet he did a skit on the guy that used to do the commentary on the the skating, who was obviously, or at least we think, gay, and it was hysterical.
Dick Butt, yeah.
It was hysterical. That strapping young, and again, I'm sure gay people got a kick out of it. So they missed the point. God bless him. But I didn't expect him to die this soon. He retired less than anyway. So what did you think? I'm sorry, I'm going on and on here, but it really bothered me.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, he was one of the icons. You know, when we started listening to talk radio, we were fortunate. You know, we were able to listen to a lot of the real top personalities in the field. You know, and you know, when I heard that Imus died, I mean, you know, the first thought that came to my mind was, boy, oh boy, our generation now is starting to be picked off at a more rapid rate.
Oh, don't think I didn't. You know, one of the guys I've been reading a lot about, because as I move the show into the new year, I want to add more humor, and I want to follow a dictum that he and Imus shared, which is be yourself. And one of the geniuses we lost way too young was George Carlin. Just way, you know, and he won at 71, which is what you're going to be soon. Sorry, but
Thanks, pal.
No, you know, although we could do a whole show on this. In fact, I'm probably going to in the new year. You know, you're our age, unless you do something like this where the skill gets, for good or ill, is ageless, or you get elected to office. No one's interested in you. I mean, no one, like, you could, unless, you know, you could be a brain surgeon at 70. Take a walk, fella, you know. So, and it's a reality that's very hard to take. Although here's a guy that had a better run. The guy, Charlie Brown, this guy, the producer, Lee Mendelson, who did all those great cartoons that we love, like Charlie Brown Christmas, who worked with Charles Schultz. He died at 86 as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, at the end of the year, we always do these retrospectives, which, you know, look at the people that passed on, you know, during this past year. And a lot of times you say, gee, I didn't realize so-and-so died this year.
Well, that happened the other day. I was talking about that. I didn't know that Frank Robinson died. I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's, oh boy,
hey,
the march of time, I tell you what.
Speaking of Imus and speaking of Stern, but also speaking of George Carlin and other things, I cut an article out of the paper that's going to get people annoyed at me. And I thought, well, since I feel this way, I should say it. For all the miserable things that the New England Patriots have done, the least offensive to me was Robert Kraft finding a place where he could get a happy ending. Who cares?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you.
Who cares?
I agree with you.
What kind of pompous, religiously frustrated, let me put it that way, nut gives a hoot that an 80-year-old guy, the fact that he was even able to, you know, have fun, leave him alone. Do you think he's going home to Mrs. Kraft? And look, and if I say this is going to sound like a locker room, because there is a group out there, and I don't know if they're women or liberals or men or what they are, that think, oh, you rolled the dice bad, huh? Your wife treats your body like you were dipped in polonium?
Well, I think the happier ending was the Patriots losing yesterday.
Yeah, it was. No, but what I'm saying is, who cares? Leave the guy. I mean, look, he's a creep. He's a miserable cheat. So what? All right, it's against the law. You pay your fine. Leave him alone. You know, they didn't want to hang him for cheating. How American is that? Your team's been caught cheating 3 times. You tried to get the commissioner fired. You robbed money from people and other teams when you did it. And somebody cared that he allowed some girl to grab his crotch. Think about it. He's 85 years old. It's not going to happen to him that many more times. Whatever. No, it's such a great hypocrisy. It's ridiculous. Why did I?
Yeah.
Was I allowed to say the middle word? Well, yeah, because my daughter married one. But I digress. Where am I? I just had to cut that out. And all right. Can I yell at Governor Cuomo? You know, he talk about hypocrisy. I hope my friends on the right are listening because they should have caught this. And if they didn't, twice now, he's done what people criticize Trump for. You know the way Trump and people on the right will always try and grasp, well, that's terrorism. Well, yes, this guy that did what he did yesterday should be, you know, he's schizophrenic, what he did in the Monsi thing. This guy's just a nut, probably with a bit of copycat. And this is not the least of which intended to minimize anti-Semitism, which we rail about all the time on this show. Never again, folks. Never again. You keep that in the diaspora. But now he's calling, I don't care, it's terrorism. No, the guy was crazy, Governor. It's domestic terrorism. He wants to get votes. You know, it's not terrorism. He's crazy. Well, no, it's an opportunity to get votes. Whoops, did I say that? Similarly, last week he vetoed a perfectly sensible bill that would allow federal judges from outside New York to solemnize marriages here. And as the paper said, pulling his own dumb version of Trump's Obama judge smear. Does he realize that he is just, he's doing the same thing that he criticizes the president of? Do you think he realizes that?
No, I don't think so. You know, I think the thing with the terrorism, he's trying to make it more, what would you say, more heinous than it was, even though it's very heinous, so that he seems more supportive of, combating anti-Semitism. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know what it is. I'm sorry.
I think what he's trying to do is just make himself seem like he's more supportive of Jewish people by calling it terrorism as opposed to, just some nutcase who, broke into these people's homes
and just taking advantage. It's opportunistic. It's disingenuous. Although the one thing
it's too bad that those Jewish people didn't have the same opportunity that the guy down the parishioners down
take
in
a couple
Texas
of pops
had.
at him.
Put a couple of 45 caliber holes in the guy.
Well, you know what does bother me though about mental illness? See what one of the reasons that I got to get out of radio one day and just write because there's so much craziness, but a lot of it has to do with the way, whatever bubble people live in, the way they see the world. For example, what I've always said is when people go crazy, why don't they just go out and chew on cement or chew on Play-Doh for that matter? Or take a fork and poke their own eyes out. Look, I don't want them to do that. But no, what I'm saying is, why do they do this? And that's probably the county executive. I got to get to him. But what I'm saying is, but they don't do that. They kill people. If they're white supremacists, they kill black people. If they're black people who feel confronted but they're crazy, they kill white people or each other. Now this guy sees, oh look, people are killing Jews. I think I'll kill a Jew. Why don't they do that? Or for example, why don't they stick their head in the television and turn on the power? Now, this is not me. I'm not anti-mental illness. As you know, I wrote a book about the damn thing. I care a lot about it. We need to help people. But what they're doing now, it ain't working. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go take a pill. I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much.
All right, Bob. Have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, you too. Vince Russo, he helps me get started. Now we're going to get to... Mr. Latimer, I made him wait. I lost track of the time, Mr. County Executive. And boy, I wish this rain would stop. I gotta get my daughter to that. My granddaughter too. And here he is. Please welcome, without further ado. It's that time as it is each and every Monday. Never misses an appointment with anybody. We're proud to have him and wish the day before a very happy New Year and much success to County Executive George Latimer. Good morning, County Executive.
Good morning, Bob. How are you this last day of the last Monday of the year?
Better than I thought. I have no idea why. My 2 hours sleep, but I feel great. But anyway, I'm hoping that the rain will stop. I want to get a night in at the at that wonderful winter wonderland you have. It wouldn't bother me if it changed.
Nice,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nice event up there.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know we've got a
nice
bad connection. So
I can hear you fine, Bob.
Okay, if we
So
lose it again,
if you
I'll
want
call
me to
you.
comment, I'll tell you it's a nice event, and people should catch up. There's only a couple of days left, so they should come up and see it if they can at Kensico Dam Plaza.
Oh, it's a wonderful event at the Kensico Dam Plaza. So here we are. Tomorrow's your last day of, I guess it's your second year. Well, time flies when you're having
Correct.
fun. I was looking at some of the
Correct.
press releases coming across. Didn't you get any time off in the last week?
No, we've been working. It's truthfully not the busiest time of the year. There's a lot of preparatory stuff for the new year, but we're also trying to assess, as everybody does at the end of a year, how far have we come and how far do we have to go in issues that are still pending. When we start the new year, 2020, this is the year of the census, and we put energy and time into helping promote the census so that we get as accurate accounts in Westchester County as we can. And so preparatory work along those lines are underway. With the new year, we prepare for things that are cyclical, such as our springtime, summertime, fall recreation programs, which obviously include Playland, which we'll be managing for 2020, but also our golf courses, our pools, what work has to be done between now and then to put these things in a good condition. We're looking at how we did at the end of the year statistically on bridge strikes. We believe that they're down, but we're waiting for the actual numbers so we can issue a report. We're going to start in January to have regional meetings with the various local governments about affordable housing. We issued an affordable housing plan in November that lays out the need, and we indicated we'd have a series of regional meetings in January to start getting into the nuts and bolts of how we advance the need that exists in the county. The Playland lawsuit will probably be in court late January, perhaps, maybe February, and so that will play out. That'll take a lot of attention. Our plans at the airport will start to move apace. We have a meeting with the FAA in Chappaqua to meet with some residents. I think that's in January. And then we restart our coffee and conversations, where I go with each of the county legislators in their district on a Saturday morning, 10 to 11:30. We have coffee. We take on whatever questions people have. And every year I try to do 17 of them, one with each of the county legislators. It's a little more than one a month. And we've got to start booking those. So, it's halftime. You're in the locker room. You're studying what you can do better, but you got to get back out in the field and play the second half of the game.
You certainly do. Our guest this morning, George Latimer, County Executive. He's with us each and every Monday to start the week, and we're grateful. Now, will you be participating in like the ball dropping at White Plains, or is that just the mayor? Do you get involved in that at all, or?
Well, it's a White Plains city event,
Right?
So they have done a very good job of creating a tradition that many people in Westchester attach to.
Yes.
In many ways, downtown White Plains is downtown Westchester because of its location.
Yes.
But it's Tom Roach's show.
Yes, it's Tom's show. Yeah, very much so. Tom Roach, the mayor of White Plains, coming out of the gate next year. Well, Thursday, I guess we'll say. What do you think you'll be up to on Thursday? What do you think? What's the first thing you're going to hit the ground running doing?
Well, I'll be in the office, and Thursday is Board of Acquisition and Contract, where we look at some of the lesser contracts. So I have to be ready for that. And, all of these things that I've talked about, one of the things we're going to be working on early is our state legislative efforts. The state legislature goes back into session every January. I knew that from my own experiences for 13 years. And what are some of the issues that we're going to be looking at? Obviously, we're very concerned about how the state is going to close the $6 to $7 billion budget gap they have, and if they're going to do it by dropping costs onto the county government, which would destabilize our restabilized budget. We're worried about that, so we have to impact on that. We have a number of different issues that we're interested from a local government standpoint. I mean, they're going to be discussing sports betting and marijuana and some of these macro issues. The changes in the criminal justice system are coming into play on the 1st of January. Now, it's really a prosecutorial and judicial impact, but the police departments are very impacted by it as well. And so to that extent, it includes the county police department, and they're going to have to be able to get documentation more quickly. And it's going to be quite a sea change, and I think we're all concerned that it be well administered, because if there's a failure anywhere along the line, if some bad guy gets loose because of these things and does something bad, that's going to be a real problem. And but the implementation of it is somewhat within our control, but a lot of it is outside of our control.
We're talking with County Executive George Latimer at 7:42 here on Radio Westchester, raining steadily, actually off and on right now, but it'll be steadily throughout the rest of the day. We saw the tragedy. New news has come out this morning that the individual that did the machete stabbing in Muncie is mentally ill. We saw comments by yourself and, of course, by the county legislature. Have you been in touch with the county executive in Rockland? And is there anything you'd like to say about this?
No, I mean, we commented about what we in Westchester have to do.
Yes.
And so we put into motion, some additional police patrols and so forth. We're very careful. Ed Day's a friend of mine. We're very careful to let each county do the things they have to do without any second guessing from across the dotted line.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I know you're on a short leash. I just have one more question, two more actually.
That's okay. I block the time every Monday.
Okay, good. I'm glad because I wanted to ask you. You know, you said something interesting before, County Executive. You're in halftime. You're looking at the details, the statistics of the first half. And is there anything you really would have liked to get done? I mean, you had a busy and pretty successful first half by most people we talked to. It's not coming from my unknowledgeable head. But people think you did a pretty good job. What do you think? What would you have liked to do better?
Well, I mean, I think, the things that we were able to resolve, I think satisfactorily, were things of a certain size and scope. Opening the pools at Sprainbridge, fixing the Miller House, getting the CDBG program back in force, stabilizing our finances and sharing revenue with the local governments. All of those, I think, represent solid accomplishments. However, there are a lot of things that just are still in play. How we're going to handle the airport and the noise problems at the airport. We're in a tight spot. Maybe 15% of the people of the county are affected by airport noise. 85% of the people are not. And so for 85% of the people, it's not an issue. For the 15% that it is an issue, it's very intense. However, the county does not control the skies, and the biggest reason of the noise is the way the FAA charts landing and takeoff paths in and out of the airport. And when they concentrate along one corridor, they create a lot of noise for the people who live in that corridor. And we don't have any direct control over it, but obviously we're the level of government that people can complain to. You can't reach an FAA official or a United States senator. So you go to the county, which runs the airport, although not the skies. And so that proves to be a bit of a vexing problem. We've made progress at the airport in dealing with water pollution. We have a program now, along with the state, the DEC consent order, to clean up any of that pollution into the water. So we think we're making good progress there. Many things in the second half of the term are issues that in the first half of the term, we made some progress on, but we didn't resolve them in full. I think, you look at the county center as another example. That hasn't come up as a public policy issue. We've obviously used it very creatively over these 2 years with some professional sports teams coming in and a greater diversity of actions and activities. But the building hasn't been renovated in 35 years. Andrew O'Rourke, when he was county executive, did a brilliant job of getting it renovated, but it now shows 35 years of wear and tear. And believe you me, that building goes through wear and tear every single day. The way it gets reconfigured for the Nutcracker, and then for a basketball game, and then for something else. What we do with that facility, to be quite honest with you, has a lot to do with what happens to the MGM Grand facility over in Yonkers.
Sure.
Because if they're able to become a full casino, they have spoken about putting in an arena and a venue for concerts and so forth. If they're going to do that, that's the primary place for those kind of events in Westchester County. It'll be done through the private sector, not through the public sector. And then whatever we do with the county center as a venue, we'd still be an exhibit hall. We'd still do the baseball card show, the train show, the reptile show, and all that. But the higher profile events will probably go to the MGM Grand facility. So now, do we spend a ton of money to fix up the county center to make it look like a central type of location for events, or do we wait to find out what happens with MGM Grand? That's a decision we have to make. It's not been publicized in the newspaper, but that's an example of having to sort of know what's going to happen at MGM Grand. And as I said, we're happy to for them in the private sector to build a beautiful new arena for the county, but we have to know that's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then it does change the fact of what we might do at the county center and how much improvement and so forth would be possible.
Wow, that's going to make for a big change. Our guest George Latimer here on Radio Westchester. As you know, we're beginning to see a sea change, and I know this doesn't. No, the sea changes to. I chose the wrong words. Regarding development, which the county's not directly involved in, it's in the cities. But we're seeing a little bit of pushback even here in New Rochelle, where the development has been uber successful. Down in New York City and elsewhere, there's this huge concern now about gentrification. How much does, and in fact, even maybe changing the tax code because of it, how much of that really affects the county? And does the county ever talk with these cities and say, hey, what are we doing? Or do you just have to keep your nose out of that?
Well, we have dialogue with all of the municipalities all the time. New York State is a home rule state, which gives tremendous powers to cities particularly, and then to some extent to towns and villages. And in most cases, the big cities of Westchester County, the four biggest cities, maybe Peekskill is the fifth city, pretty much can chart their own course by law to do the things they want to do. Certainly, even every little village has their own zoning and planning. If we have a county facility in a small town or a small village, we still have to go to local zoning and planning to do something that the county wants to do. We just can't do whatever we want to do. However, the development of Yonkers, New Rochelle, and White Plains, the three biggest ones that have been growing dramatically, are really done at City Hall. So we do interact with them. There are times when we're involved because of affordable housing needs, where we try to work with them to get some money to help some of the units be affordable, so that'll help deal with that issue. In the case of White Plains, the county's IDA, Industrial Development Agency, provides the financing support for projects in White Plains. In the case of Yonkers and New Rochelle, they have their own. And I think we're all looking at Mount Vernon now, new mayor coming in, and a new fresh start, sort of hit the reset button, to see if Mount Vernon now will start to realize its potential. But here's the problem. You mentioned gentrification. Gentrification is a little more of a classic, New York City thing, where the demand for upscale housing pushes out of Manhattan, pushes out of parts of Brooklyn, and into neighborhoods that were previously not just underdeveloped, but were poor neighborhoods. And the value of the land rises and pushes poor people further away. They cluster into other neighborhoods further away. The closer you are to Manhattan and Brooklyn, the more valuable the land is. You have a little bit of that in a few places in Westchester County, but not to a great extent. You look at White Plains. White Plains really doesn't have a significant population like that is being pushed aside for gentrification. What you do have is you have a mindset of, I grew up in a small city. It was like a small town. I heard it all the time. I've represented New Rochelle for over 15 years now, and I represented the South End of the State Assembly specifically. And they'll say, New Rochelle as I remember it. I grew up in the West End, or I live in the South End. And all of this is pushing, it's changing the scope. It's not necessarily gentrification in the sense that it's been used in Brooklyn and so forth, but it's a change in the way the community looks and feels. And that is the political argument that is worked out in each community very differently. Yonkers is a very big city. It's 3 times the size and population of New Rochelle. You could live in parts of Yonkers and be 5-6 miles away from the heart of Yonkers. And
sure.
Development is. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit true in New Rochelle. If you go to the far north end of New Rochelle, you are 5-6 miles away from downtown New Rochelle. You're much closer to even downtown White Plains in the furthermost northern part of New Rochelle. Mm-hmm. But New Rochelle is a more compact city. White Plains is a more compact city. Mount Vernon is a more compact city. So I think what you're experiencing when you hear the pushback is you hear people who are really saying, you're changing the way my city feels. This is not the city I grew up in. This is not the city I came to maturity in. But the county has no role in making those definitions. We at the table we're worried about sewer capacity. If there's going to be development in any of these communities, do our sewer treatment plants have the capacity to absorb that many more residential units? A residential building uses more sewage capacity than an office building does. But office space is going through a complete change as people telecommute, as people need less official office space to conduct their business, and residential growth, particularly near train stations, seems to be exploding. Now, here's the bad news, Bob. You and I are men of a certain age. I'm not going to out your age on the radio.
Nah,
I'm
69. Yeah, I'm there. Damn it.
Okay. So am I going to live 30 years? I think it would be nice. I don't know that I will. In 30 years, will all of the building that we're doing now still have a market? I don't know. It's not for me to know. I know there's a market for it now. The developers wouldn't be building it if they didn't have the likelihood that they could fill those apartments. But at some point in time, there's an ebb and flow to every economic cycle, and things that are very hot become cold again. So when I look at the development that's going on in New Rochelle and Yonkers and White Plains, and then some of the smaller communities, Marrone's had a lot of residential development around the train station. Tarrytown has had a lot of residential development. You've seen it in Tuckahoe. As long as you can walk to the train, right now there's a demand for it. And the local communities are worried about tax ratables. Why? Because everybody complains about their taxes.
Oh, yes.
Now, how are you going to raise taxes? You can develop something and add to the roll, or you can change the rate, which of course everybody goes wild when you change the rate. You raise the rates of taxing. But you must have a police force, and they're not going to take the same salary for the next 10 years. You must have a fire department of some sort. You must have garbage services. These things are not optional. And if people complain about their taxes, you need more money to run these governments. Well, development brings you some of that money. So it's a trade-off. And the real question is in the mind of the individual. Do you really understand how it works? And then if you do, and I'm sure it's not that you're stupid, you can't understand it. It's that you're seeing change, and you don't want to see change. Look, I don't like the fact that people don't read newspapers anymore. I think that's a terrible change in the society. I think it's terrible that people sit around and don't go to bricks and mortar stores anymore, and all they do is shop online all the time. I think that's a terrible change in the society. But the society is changing. I can't change it back. And I can howl at the moon every night if that's what I want to do, and sometimes I do. But the bottom line is that how do we manage this change is what's at hand. And so in those areas where there's development, the county has a tangential role, but it's really each community deciding how much development they want. And I'll give you the alternate side of it. Bronxville and Rye, and to some extent Larchmont, those are communities that are sized a certain way. The zoning code reflects that. The political consensus reflects that. And Rye will never authorize a 10-story building in downtown Rye. Larchmont will never authorize a 10-story building in downtown Larchmont, and Bronxville will never authorize a 10-story building in downtown Bronxville. They made a political decision, a political consensus. And by the way, Bronxville's pretty much Republican to the bone. Larchmont is pretty much Democratic, and Rye kind of goes back and forth between the two parties. So it's not one party is the party of development and the other party is the party of preservation.
No, that's very true.
It depends on the community.
7:55. 7:55. We're talking with County Executive George Latimer. He's with us each and every Monday, and we're fortunate to have him for a good period of time. It's 41 degrees, raining across Westchester. This raises the question we've read about and you've talked about, County Executive, affordable housing. Now, for affordable housing that the county may be involved in to go up, it's going to go up in some municipality. How does that work? And how delicate of an issue is that for the county to implement it, whereas you have home rule?
Well, it is delicate, and it begins with a site. You need a piece of land that is developable at some level. It may be a piece of land in Armonk that can accommodate 10 affordable townhouses. It could be a piece of land in Greenberg that could accommodate 45 units of housing. It could be anywhere along the continuum. For the reasons that I've just given, that each community sort of decides their own, style and density and these things. Many communities don't want affordable housing. They just don't politically, governmentally don't want it. The voters don't vote for it. And the challenge that we have is with an overall responsibility toward housing. And we had a lawsuit that was all adjudicated in my predecessor's term.
Oh, yeah.
And the federal government's superiority was determined to be true. We're looking at a situation where we have to begin the process, which is what we're doing now, by working with those municipalities that are willing to work with us and try to develop as many units as we can. But by the way, not building 2,000 units in one location, because we've proven in the society that doesn't work. That ghettoizes people, and it does not turn out to be good for the social fabric of the community. We're much better off building smaller density projects that are small in size, and can be absorbed within whatever the neighborhood is that the land is available. But Westchester doesn't have a lot of available land south of 287, and because of the market, demand for market rate housing, you get an open piece of land. If you don't own it and you have to buy it, you're competing against some private sector guy.
Oh, yeah.
Say, I can buy that piece of land and I can put up 4 big wealthy houses on it, and the neighborhood's going to be more accepting of that. The school district is going to be more accepting of that, and I can pay more money for it than you, the government, can. So it is a tough business. Now, we've had some county-owned land here and there, and on it, 41 units of senior housing in Rye, 34 units of housing in Portchester, but the county's ownership of land is fairly limited. And the minute you start talking about affordable housing, you have to talk about the impact on the school district, because if you get a certain amount of ratables or you house a certain number of people and they have kids, those kids got to go to elementary school someplace. And then next thing you know, you're spending a lot of money to expand the size and scope of the schools. So what gets me, I know we got to go, Bob. I'll wrap it up quickly.
Oh, no, go ahead.
All the time will say things like this. They'll say things like this. They say, you politicians are morons. You don't understand. What world do you live in? Do you understand how much taxes I pay? I'm sweating, and you're up there. And I go, stop. I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I meet more people in this county probably than any other person alive. Maybe the postman meets more people, whatever. But I talk to people from Bronxville to Portchester and from Peekskill to Pelham to Pound Ridge, and I understand the diversity of feeling and outset. That's why I'm moving very carefully, but very deliberately to do certain things. The moron line comes from, I have a position, you don't share it, therefore you're a moron. And that is what has been making it impossible in America today to make progress in government. We're too willing to vilify the other person instead of sitting down and working with them. My party is guilty of this, and the other party is guilty of this. And people who are very conservative don't want to hear from people that aren't conservative. People who are very liberal do not want to hear from people that are not very liberal. And both of them attack centrists. The Republican centrists have been run out of the party. And you're getting some of that in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
Centrist has now become a bad word.
Hey,
and it's in the center that we dialogue and we solve problems.
Before you go, I want to give you an opportunity, if you have any kind of a New Year's message or anything you want to say to the county or to your constituents, take a moment.
I would just say the one thing, obviously, we hope that everybody has a very healthy and happy New Year. What I would say is, look around you and realize that we are very lucky people. I am, you are, the other people I see. Not everybody has the same level of economics. There are people out there today that are dealing with health issues, or they have a child with an opioid addiction, or they're in a bad situation in a relationship. I mean, no, life isn't perfect. But when you stop and think about it, is it really worth complaining every hour of the day about something? It's a beautiful world, and it is also a dangerous and difficult world. But we're alive. Most of us, as I speak right now, are healthy enough to live our day and appreciate it. Look around and I happen to be a person of faith. I believe in an almighty God. Different people have different beliefs. But, be grateful as we go into this new decade that we're here to do that. And I say that only because sometimes in the world of politics, all you ever hear is the complaints. People just are never happy, never satisfied. When something good gets done, they immediately jump to the next thing that they think has to be done. And we don't stop enough and say, this is a wonderful world. Here's the bad news. We don't live forever. And the time is going to come where we're going to face the end of days, and then all of the complaining won't have mattered. What will matter is, did we treat people properly? Did we have a peaceable life? Did we contribute to the world around us? And if I can do that myself personally in the next year, God help me, I live 10 years in the next decade, that'll be it. That's the legacy. There's no Mount Rushmore. Nobody's going to name a bridge after me. This is just do what you think is right, live peaceably with the people around you, and go forward.
Well, County Executive, I'll craft a paper mache bust of you. You will not go remembered. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for all the time you give us each Monday. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again next week in the new year. Happy New Year. My best to you and yours, sir.
Talk to you next year.
Talk to you next year, County Executive. County Executive George Latimer, thank you very much. Folks, you all know what's coming up. Let's see how our man Jake did. Jake's picks of the week. He's over there drinking a little soda. He's pumping coffee. He's blowing his nose. It's going to be interesting. First, we'll share the weather with you. The weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. That was pretty good by the county executive. I like that message. Kind of agree with a lot of it. Once you go, that was, by the way, the point of that movie. And for those of you who saw it, a lot of people missed the point of The Irishman. It's at the end of the movie. None of it mattered. Everybody was gone. All righty. It's 41 right now. It's going to get up to 43. And rain all day, off and on. Periods of rain with pockets of heavier downpours. Now, tonight, please, spots north of 287 or I-84. As it gets colder tonight, it's going to be 40 most of the day, but as it gets colder tonight, down to wind chills of 32 or below. Be aware of it, because tonight we'll have rain showers towards the end of the evening. Now tomorrow, partly sunny with highs around 44. Normal high equals 37 degrees. Wind out of the west-southwest 5 to 15 miles per hour. And Wednesday, the first day of the new year, Jake, a mixture of sun and clouds. The high will be 39 degrees. All righty. Let's go find out what Jake is doing for Jake's Picks of the Week. And we remind you the top of the 8 o'clock hour is brought to you by Aging Issues Management, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Khan, and Plug-in Virtual Reality, and Jake's Picks. And now the results are brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrones, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located at 204 Boston Post Road in Larchmont. They're open 7 days. And you know how we feel about Jake's Picks. All right, Jake. Good morning, sir. We saw some of the games, and we saw some of you did okay. Some of the others, not so good. Let's get your results, sir.
All right, good morning, Bob.
Are you depressed?
Well, ho-hum Sunday. I went 2-2.
2 ho-hum. Okay, but let's go game by game, because people were keeping up with you, or trying to.
Well, I picked Philadelphia, and we all saw what happened. The Giants gave them a good game until Mr. Jones had a pretty costly fumble.
Again.
It was a blowout after that. So I won that
Can we
one.
put glue on his hands or something?
Be interesting to see what the new coach has in store for him. But I had 4.5 points and got a comfortable 34-17 win.
Let's get before you get to the 34-17 win across the ballpark. Is Schumer gone?
I would think so.
Yeah, it'll probably be announced. It could happen. Keep your eye on the monitor up there. It could happen any moment. So you lost the Giant game, right?
Lost? No, I won that one. I picked Philly.
You won that. That's right. You did pick Philly.
I lost the biggest upset of the year. I picked New England when the line was 15.5. The line went up to 17. The Dolphins outright beat them 27-24. So New England does not get the bye that they needed. They have to play next weekend. Playing Tennessee. I put $10 on a 60-1 Tennessee team to win the Super Bowl. So I'll be rooting hard for Tennessee on Saturday.
Okay, next.
Pittsburgh, this was a terrible pick on my part. Pittsburgh is just not good. They don't have any talent on their team. Pittsburgh needed to win to get into the playoffs. They were favored by 2. They ended up getting crushed by Baltimore, who wasn't playing anyone, 28-10. So I lost that one. And finally, Tennessee was a 3.5-point favorite in Houston. Houston wasn't playing anyone. Tennessee had to win to get in the playoffs. Tennessee handily won 35-14. So 2-2 on the week, 24-20-1 to finish off the regular season. Pick every playoff game, see how that goes, start fresh. But all in all, it's a good first season.
So you're 24-20-1.
Yes.
24-20-1. But now we get into the playoffs. We'll be doing this in the playoffs as well. And I understand the Padron friends want to come in for a special Super Bowl visit. Padron. Dominic's Fine Cigars. Jake's Picks brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located at 204 Boston Post Road in Larchmont. They're open 7 days. Now, Jake next week will have playoff picks of the week. But, Jake, there's so much going on in sports that I saved a whole bunch of things that I wanted to ask you about. So
I'm fascinated by what the Giants are going to do with their head coaching position.
should they do that, though? Is he that bad of a play caller, as they say? Because I don't trust the New York press anymore. I mean, for all the crying and gnawing and gnashing of teeth over Eli Manning, they tortured him. So is Schumer that bad in your esteem?
I think he's terrible. I think Mike McCarthy makes a lot of sense. He might be gone. Another team might swoop him up today. So I think McCarthy would make the most sense. What about Bill Belichick? No one knows what Bill Belichick's contract is. I could see the only team him leaving the Patriots for is the Giants. He started off with the Giants.
Yeah, but then he walked away from the Jets. He had to deal with the Jets. I still remember that. I was always a big Bill Belichick fan, and I was shocked. He just one day he said, I took the job, and then 2 days later he was out of Dodge. I don't know that I saw that once after that when and maybe it was before that, when the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup, their coach took off right after that. Miserable human being, anyway, one of the more miserable human beings in sports, that particular coach. Okay, what about the Jets? Are they really this good? Or
Good? I wouldn't say good.
Well, they just won 4 games in a row or something.
Yeah,
like that.
but they were playing a Bills team that had absolutely nothing to play for. Didn't play their best players, resting, getting ready for next weekend. We'll see. I don't like their coach. I thought he should have been fired. I think their quarterback's going to be really good. I like the Jets quarterback a lot more than the Giants quarterback.
Does he drop the ball as much as the Giants quarterback?
No. I think they both could be really good, but I think Darnold could be one of the best in the game.
Now,
Be right up in the Pat Mahomes tier.
Of all the sports, football seems to be, and I'm learning more and more from you, by the way, each week. It seems to be the most industrial strength. I'll tell you what I mean by that. I too watch those. No sport does better highlights than football, and I also each year watch those shows of training camp. It's almost corporate in its structure. The coaches, the scouts, they have lots of coaches and
lots of different meetings.
Subordinate coaches and meetings. So you almost need an executive to run a football team. The person has to be as good an executive as they are a play caller. And some teams, is it true that they delegate play calling to the offensive coordinator? So it really is it requires an unusually broad set of skills, I should think. And you got to know the game.
It's fascinating how teams are run. You really have to have all sorts of skill sets on a team, in an organization.
What about the GMs? Now, in baseball, they're getting more involved. But the GM seems to be very involved in football.
It seems like the most important role for a GM is the salary cap, how to structure a team, where to delegate the money, how much to spend on a quarterback, how much to spend on an offensive line, how much to spend in the defensive backfield.
That's also another corporate thing.
And a lot of guys have different philosophies. It's very interesting.
What are the philosophies?
Do you want to spend half your salary cap on a quarterback?
No.
See, I tend to think you got to build the offensive line, build both the lines.
Yeah. In other words, a good line, and you could have a quarter like as much as I was looking at a stat yesterday, where the guy that Brady was playing against, had more yards in a year running than he's had in his career, things like that.
Yeah.
So you have to have a line for that kind of a quarterback or an Eli. Although you got to invest money, I should think.
Well, if you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a quarterback, you're going to want to protect him.
Well, exactly. As well, you're going to want to give him time to throw if that's what he is. Now, having said that, some coaches, such as Belichick, is he also the GM?
He runs everything.
He does run everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
He doesn't call the plays though.
He doesn't.
He hands over the offense 90% of it to his offensive coordinator, but he's a defensive guy first and foremost.
Will he call a play at the end of the game with 10 seconds left?
the offensive. He'll talk with the offensive coordinator, and he'll have final say on what the play is. I'm sure. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, how much is defense? I mean, defense to me, being a coach of hockey all my life, I care. And I know players get upset with me. I care more about defense than offense. I generally do, and it's a fault sometimes. But are football coaches that way?
50-50. Really depends
Really?
what their background is.
Some just want to shoot you down. And Belichick is a defensive guy?
Yeah, and look at the Saints. Peyton is an offensive guy. Two great coaches, two direct opposite ideas on how to play football.
It's interesting. Okay.
So I have an idea now that the football season's winding down.
Go ahead.
And the campaign season is picking up, and I've had my feet held to the fire all football season, so I think we should turn it back onto you for the campaign season and maybe do some Bob's campaign questions. I've got a little taste. You want a little taste
ahead.
right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I thought we'd start off with campaign slogans. So match this winning campaign slogan with the president who ran it. You up for this?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, the first one. Happy days are here again. Campaign slogan.
Happy days are here again for which candidate? Happy days. Well, they do that every time when a guy gets nominated. But in this case, happy days are here again would happen if Joe Biden gets elected.
It's FDR. Actually, I won't.
Oh, you wanted me to identify
Yes.
with who did it. Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
But I won't give out the answers. I'll let our genius callers chime in with what they might think if you get it wrong.
So that's what we're going to be doing in the weeks ahead. Okay,
Instead
give
of-
me another one right now.
Okay.
No, not for the callers now, because we're going to do a big show like that tomorrow. But go ahead. What do we got?
Tippy Canoe and Taylor too.
Oh, I knew this. Teddy Roosevelt? Who?
I'm not going to give out the answer. I'll save it.
Give me another one. I should know that one.
He kept us out of the war.
He kept us out of the war. Well, actually, that was FDR for a while. No?
No.
Woodrow Wilson?
Yes, very
Okay,
good.
yeah, okay, because he did keep. Okay, go ahead.
So you're 1-1 so far.
Okay, give me. I'm like you.
I'm
500.
Give me
Give me
over.
another one.
I'm
Give me
over
another-
for.
no,
I'm
I
over
got this. I
500.
got this.
All right, one more.
I got it, baby.
Return to normalcy.
Gerald Ford.
No.
It wasn't Jimmy Carter.
No.
I give up. Give me
No,
another one.
I'll
One
save
more.
it.
One more.
I only did 4.
Then I got a couple more for you. Okay. All righty. What's going to happen? Want to switch to baseball for a little bit with Mr. Cespedes?
Well, his salary's reduced.
Do we know what he really did?
Something on his ranch.
To
and it's-
lose $19 million is not a small amount of money.
I'm sure he was partying. He said he was
Partying.
riding a horse or something, but I don't believe that. I'm sure.
Whatever he did was probably in his contract that he wasn't supposed to
Absolutely.
do. You know, it's like my grandson went away for the weekend. He called me and told me he's going away for the weekend. And he now has a college scholarship for hockey on the table.
Oh, wow.
And he was going to go skiing. He and I had a little chit chat. You're not going skiing.
Where did he get the scholarship from?
Well, from a local school, Wagner College in Staten Island, but that's his first one. He can get a full, but he got a partial, and he'll probably get another one. He's a solid two-way player. He's not a big superstar, but he's a very responsible player. But still, he was going to go skiing, and I said, and hadn't skied before, and I said, you will not go skiing. You know, just for your own good. I mean, I wouldn't stop him, but
Geez, that one basketball player ruined his career going bowling.
well, yeah. And what
So you never know what's going to happen.
What about that one Yankee pitcher? He got in a fight in a bar and dislocated his shoulder and shoulder and never played again. But they say they think he can do okay. All right, here's some of the things. Record-setting contracts needs a little bit of why are umpires and referees? I think I know the answer. Why are they under so much fire these days?
They're terrible. You just watch an NFL football game and you're stunned at how well all the good referees are leaving to go to the broadcast booth. And Fox has hired a referee to, analyze a call.
Okay,
So they're making a lot more money. The
let
good
me run
referees.
my theory by. Let me run my theory by. Well, that's true because football referees are paid by the game, a couple $100 or $1,000.
TV's paying them a lot more.
Yeah, it's nothing. However, my feeling on it is that the refs they're being outclassed by cameras and technology. It's got to be hard. You know, it was always a part of the game. The interpretation of the refs, you got to live with it. Now, I mean, hockey's owned up to it a little bit with their as onerous as it is, their offside going to the cameras and stuff. That makes them look bad. And also the fact that there are so many teams and so many leagues, it spreads out. The talent is thin. Okay, baseball. Do you know yet, are they going to call electronic balls and strikes? Is that a done deal yet?
I'm sure they will work on the technology, see how it turns out in spring training and minor league games, test it out there, and then if it works, they'll switch to it, of course.
Okay, I put aside a nice story, and I wanted to talk about with you. Bob Cox is coming up next, and come on in, Robert. Take a seat. We'll get to you in a moment. In fact, you can listen to a feel-good story that we have. We don't do enough of these. Bob, there's something wrong with you. Happy New Year, Robert. Anyway, all right, this is a sweet story, and I got this out of a Jersey paper, by the way. Hours after he was born in 1989, Freddie Figures was set down, now get this, next to a dumpster in a rural area of Florida's Panhandle. A passerby found him alone and in distress and called police. The infant was hospitalized with minor injuries for 2 days, then placed in a foster home. The couple who took him in, Nathan and Betty Figures, lived in nearby Quincy, Florida, and already had a daughter. He began living with them, and they often took in foster children. They adopted him. And this kid had a gift, didn't know it. In elementary school, he said other children would bully him and call him Dumpster Baby. And that's not you laughing at Bob. Both of you, Dumpster Baby. Let me say, Bob.
Starting to like the story better.
This is a feel-good story. I have two fiends in here. Okay, it's a rural area. Okay, so after it happened, everybody heard about it. And Figures now 30. My parents told me the truth about what happened, and as I grew older, I thought about it a lot as a kid, and I'd have to say it was embarrassing when I was younger. Do you need a pen, Bob, or paper or anything like that? His life hit a turning point when he was 9, when his father paid $25 for a broken 1989 Macintosh. Let's see if Cox or Schaefer could do this. He took it apart and put it back together several times and made
I could take it apart.
He made it work.
Did he find it in a dumpster?
No. You see, you are both evil. What? The demon seed is spread in this radio station today. Okay. He thought that a computer might help to keep me out of trouble. Anyway, his father was right. Figures took it apart and put it back together several times. He figured out that he could get it to power on when he installed some components he found in an old radio that belonged to his dad. I still have it. It's what sparked my interest in technology. Self-starter, fast learner, we move on. His big break came several years later in 2012 when at age 23 he sold a GPS tracker that he built to an undisclosed company in Kansas for $2.2 million. Now it gets better. His father developed Alzheimer's disease and would frequently wander off when he was confused. He created a transponder and created a device that he would insert in his shoe so that people could keep track of people wandering. And now this guy is a very rich kid taking care of his father and has developed 80 custom-ware programs with the money he earned from that original funding. Married to Natalie Figures, an attorney, Figures said he's caught up in the joy of raising his first child, who is 2. So that's a nice story, and we had to do that, especially with your sports thing now ebbing, you 500 pitcher that you are. Oh, no, but maybe we should say you're the best because you have a good, you're smart. Like the pitcher.
Baby.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we got Bob Cox early today. This is a holiday show. Tomorrow, we have a lot of special stuff to do. We'll talk about it. But first, let's take a break. Let's look at the weather. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And as we look at the weather, it's 41 still, getting up to 43 today. Overcast, rain. It's raining off and on all day. It's going to rain right into the nighttime. Now, the temperatures will drop a bit tonight, getting down around 37. But because of wind chills, if you are north of 287, beware. There may be some ice and dangerous road conditions. Tomorrow, that's New Year's Eve, partly sunny with highs around 44, normal high 37, wind out of the west-southwest 5 to 15. And for tomorrow night, happy 2020. Not yet, tomorrow, partly cloudy, chance for a stray flurry, otherwise dry, lows around 32. And Wednesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, the high will be 39 degrees. And the bottom of the hour and our time with Bob Cox is sponsored by Aging Issues Management, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, Plug-in Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Fine Cigars, who are looking for a new handicapper who's 22-20-1. Actually, not a bad record. Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located at Boston, 204 Boston Post Road. Let me see what we got here. Okay. Bob Cox is in the house, and we're going to be talking with him about the year-end review. And when I ask him about it, well, he's going to try and identify his top 10 stories. Please welcome, without further ado, he was with us from day one, and he is with us each and every Monday for an hour. Today he's at 45 minutes, a little less time today for one of our holiday shows as we spend the time doing some other stuff. But next week he will be back with us in his usual 9 o'clock spot. But you get an early treatment today. Please welcome, without further ado, Bob Cox. Bob, Happy New Year to you, a day in advance.
Happy New Year. Good to be here.
Your top 10 stories. Let me get out a piece of paper. I am anxious about this.
Well, we're going to work on the top 10 selection right here, live.
Okay.
What I did was I went through my stories for the year.
Oh, by the way, excuse me. I neglected my usual speech here. Bob Cox, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound. Consider the source since 2008. Go ahead, sir.
Right. So what I did was I went through my stories. So there may be stories that were significant, but I didn't write them. Okay, so I left them to the side. And what I did was I focused on what I wrote, and I did a preliminary cut for each month of what were the stories for the year. And actually, it's amazing how quickly we forget.
Well, because each day comes at you like a wave.
And so there is a value to going back and looking at it. So I did publish a list of stories that I wrote over the past year. So they're up on Talk of the Sound right now. So if anybody wants to go take a look at it, you're certainly welcome to weigh in. But I had to figure out what I want my criteria to be, because there are some stories that I wrote where there was high news value. It brought something, brand new to the public. Others were, significant events, but I didn't cover it, alone. And then there was some deep dives that I did where I brought forth information that would have otherwise been buried. So,
gee, this is going to be tough.
Yeah,
looking at the stories.
Yeah. So so I think it's a little tricky, but I went back all the way to January, right?
Obviously. Oh, I'm looking. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I'm looking at my January list. So I guess maybe the best thing is to kind of take it month by month and pick out a few of the highlights each month.
Okay, yeah, I think you should. However, one of the things that I just want listeners to think about, Vladimir's magic lamp. One of the things that I want listeners to think about is what makes a story, even when we put it in the headlines, there are a lot of factors. How many people it affects? Does it affect us locally? Are there large amounts of money? Are there felonies? And all kinds of things. Like I thought I'm reading some of your headlines because they involve one of them, grandson of former Governor Malcolm Wilson, belly flops in media rollout. He did too. He did. It was on my show.
Yeah,
he had a rough day.
Well, and that's a good example because that's a story that actually ended up having an impact.
It does have an impact. It had an impact to the city. It's the mayoralty.
Well, it had an impact on the race
because
because the Republicans were not happy with that story. Obviously, Brendan Conroy was not happy with it. And when it got down to the actual race in the fall, you had the mayor actually using that piece to go after Brendan Conroy. So my story ended up becoming part of the campaign. So, yeah, there are examples like that. But I would say looking at January, and by the way, there's one other thing too, which is that, so there's stories that, happen, if you just look at the calendar,
sure,
where maybe it wasn't clear at the time, how significant that story was. And I'll even say that sometimes I kind of focused on the wrong part of the story, or just there wasn't something that wasn't known at the time. So looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot back in the summer I wrote about that, but actually what was really important about it was this other thing. But looking just taking January.
Okay, let's take January. I know the story in January I like most, but let's see what you think.
Okay, well go ahead.
Okay. This is
I don't know
big.
if it's liking. We've got stabbing.
Well, when I say like,
stealing.
no. When I say like, I mean as your top story, and it's school official diverted millions to ineligible parochial school students. Millions jumps off the page.
Yeah, and in fact, they have never really responded to that. But my sources inside say that they are actually working to change that so that this money is not going to these
millions.
Yeah.
Literally millions. It costs millions to get these kids to school over what period of time?
Well, I mean, got to read the article to find out.
Oh,
Bob.
for God's sakes! You're the guy who wrote it.
Well, we don't have time to go into each and every
I know,
story.
but anyway, okay, but
so
it is millions.
All these stories are linked on the homepage.
No, I understand that, and you're going to drive people to the site. You're a genius that way. But what I'm asking you, as the author of the story, roughly speaking, over what period of time, Weisenheimer? Roughly speaking. I mean, if it's millions over 100 years, it's not that much money.
Well,
he's giving me a look.
I'm just going to say that we can't go into these
Okay,
stories.
fine.
We only have a limited
What's
amount
your
of time.
top story in January?
I think that the big one there, in terms of the overall scheme of things, was the district getting a new law firm. They had the same law firm for about 40 years. And so they finally changed it. I don't know that they changed it for the better, but the fact is that they changed it. I didn't have a lot of regard for the previous law firm. I'm not terribly impressed with the current law firm either. So I'm not sure this is good or bad, but it just was a big deal. And we had lobbied very hard for this for a very long time to get rid of that law firm. And I was glad to see them go. So, but then, of course, you have the sentencing of Brian Stamp. So you have the conclusion of that case. That was from a year earlier, so you finally get the sentencing.
How much time did he get? Got to read the story. By the way, folks, let me remind you, can play along at home. What we encourage you to do is go on the Talk of the Sound website where each of these stories month by month are listed. And we have the flexibility to go a little late today, so we're going to have some fun with this. All right. Brian Stamps. Oh, he's checking out his own story. He forgot what he wrote.
No, I just was thinking about it there. But
Anthony Galetta has visited us, and we're happy to see him. You're losing weight. We don't like this. You got to stay healthy. All right, go ahead.
So the transportation study story, because there was multiple. So that, I think, is a big story. Brian Stamps being sentenced. And if I'm going to group it together.
They're all great stories.
If I'm going to group it over the court, we're going to see other stories coming up, right, which is a lot of the sentencing related to the school violence that occurred in 2018, because it took a while to happen. So not only do you get Brian Stamps, but later on we're going to get the people that were involved in the murder of Valerie Schwab. So we're going to have that too. So that is I would put that as sort of a theme, which is the the sentencing related.
As we say, it's like a thread that'll run through
Yeah, I think
several
so.
months.
I
Wait,
think
one
so.
of the other things I wanted to mention, January was a busy month for you. And you didn't even run out of January yet. 2.6 to 7 point. That's quite a spread spent on wrongfully enrolled students. That's a lot of money, too.
Yeah, and it's funny because after the guy made the statement, the district denied he said it. Of course, there's videotape, but
They denied he said it.
yeah,
Wait, we have the videotape, and he denied he said it.
it's New Rochelle. I mean, what am I
Okay.
going to tell you? They've just
All right,
flat out
let's go
denied
to
it.
let's go to February.
Like, it was a public meeting. I mean, there's recordings, but so more about the busing, more around.
But you got the secret transportation study, a secret study.
Yeah.
Secret transportation study.
Yeah, what one of the tricks that the school district does all the time is they order up these studies and then they never request the final version. And because it's marked as draft, they then say, well, it's draft. It's an interagency work product. It's not finished. When it's finished, you can foil for a copy. But it's never finished.
It's never finished.
This is from 2015.
It's a great
I've been
idea.
foiling it for years. They won't give it to me. Finally, someone just gave me a copy of it, so I was able to read it. But I will tell you one thing: the board, the board, right, then and now, never read it. Obviously, because they're talking about things that are flatly contradicted in this report. But this report was a big deal because it showed, for example, that the district was filing for reimbursement from the state every year for about $1 million. They basically were running scams with bidding out the busing contracts. And I think probably the most notable thing about this, among many problems with the transportation that was found in this report, was RFPs, requests for proposal, when they bid out work in the school district or the city or any government agency. It's done by the purchasing department, okay, which would make sense. They write the RFPs. They usually work with the attorney, except for transportation. All of the RFPs were done by the transportation department itself, which is not how it's done around the state, and it's not how it's done elsewhere in New Rochelle. And it raises a serious questions about why that was done. And I believe the reason it was done was because they were getting kickbacks and bribes. And that's the only reason to do it that way.
Who would have been getting such bribes?
The people that were running the transportation program.
Yeah, because I see that keeps popping up. That is.
But that to me is another example of the kind of thing that they didn't want it out there because it was embarrassing. It showed potential corruption. They didn't want to investigate it. They never did investigate it. And the people who got the kickbacks and bribes, and let's be clear, it's not unprecedented in New Rochelle schools for that to happen, got away with it. Okay, that's my view of the situation. So anyway, so we'll leave it at that.
Can I just go to this? How indivisible Westchester co-opted school safety in New Rochelle to elect their candidates on your dime. I like that story because political influence isn't supposed to be a big deal in schools, yet it was here.
Well, it always is in New Rochelle. I mean, the whole board is a political construct. They've been mostly put there by Noam and the mayor, Mayor Noam Bramson and the Democratic Party. But in this particular case, what happened was I was trying to obtain some emails about a different topic. So I requested a set of emails. I requested emails between the city manager and people in the school district and the mayor and the people in the school district. And the reason I did that is because I can't get hold of internal emails, okay, because they're privileged.
Right.
But I can get intra-agency emails, okay? So as they were communicating back and forth, all that becomes a public record. I'm not sure that certain people in the school district even realize that, but one of the things that came out of those emails, which was not what I was looking for, was reading this exchange where representatives from Indivisible Westchester contacted the mayor saying, we want to identify students basically who could act as a front for our efforts to help the county executive by elevating the gun control issue by latching on to the Parkland shooting that had happened not much earlier than that, a little bit before this. And so then the mayor forwards it to the board president, okay, Rachel Relkin at the time. And then she identifies, who might be a good person to contact and puts them in contact with the parents of the girl that they're recommending to be the front. And in fact, they went ahead and did this. There was a protest held in March of 2018, at the high school. And it was interesting because the school district promoted it heavily, even though it was actually illegal. It was the middle of the school day, right? They promoted it heavily because it took away attention from the school violence in January. So they were happy to do it. Indivisible was happy to do it, and everybody played along. In fact, the Journal News did a story where they interviewed the grassroots effort by students around the county to take on the gun control issue, but in fact, it was all being financed by Indivisible Westchester, even though the students themselves didn't realize it because a number of them complained about some of this reporting. They also paid to send a bus down to Washington. If you remember last year,
Yes.
2018, a bunch of schools refused to come to New Rochelle for a model Congress session. And so since they weren't coming, a bus trip to Washington to protest gun control, advocate for gun control, went down to Washington. Indivisible paid for the bus. So, and that came out of these emails. So these are the kind of things that that never really come out unless somebody does a deep dive into
which is what
stuff.
you do. My guest is the guest here at Radio Westchester is Bob Cox. He is the managing editor and the publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. We're going to jump to March in the
Well,
interest
but by the
of-
way, before you skip February, I just need to say, February was when we had new candidates running for
Oh, yes.
city
Okay, go ahead.
council.
Yeah.
So you got Brendan Conroy, of course, but you also had that officially Barry Fertel, Jared Rice were not going to run. They didn't run.
That was when you announced that Jared Rice, 8 months before it happened, was going to be the next judge.
Well, I don't think that was mind reading. That was
No.
out there. Just reporting what everybody's talking about. But so that was a significant thing that happened in February. Was that you had another sentencing in the Valerie Schwab situation, and the one story that I really latched onto was. It wasn't actually really about George Latimer. It was really about the media. And he put out this narrative, and so did all the people around him.
The 1%.
That his
versus-
sales tax increase was a 1% sales tax increase. In fact, it's a 14% sales tax increase.
for the people who got it. In other words, that 1% only in certain cities did that apply, correct?
Do you only shop in New Rochelle, Bob?
No, of course not.
Okay. So
No,
it's
I'm
everybody.
not. No, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, go ahead.
That-
But it was,
you're-
but I finally figured it out because you called me on that, and then I said, "What's 1% of?" I said it's 14%, and then I finally figured it out.
Well, let's put it this way. George wanted to tell everybody, the county, Mr. Latimer, but George does, wanted to push out this narrative that it was a trivial increase.
No, it wasn't trivial. It's going to raise a lot of money for the county.
Well,
let me tell you.
somehow the projection by August was it was going to raise $170 million a year forever. So somehow it's significant enough to generate that. And of course, because George wanted to talk about his magic lamp, and
What was the magic lamp? Could you tell me about that?
well, the magic lamp was he kept giving an example about the effect of the increase and how he calculated that it was a 1% increase. He said that if you bought this lamp and the tax rate was 7 3/8,
Oh, I get it.
it went to 8 3/8, it only
magic
went up
lamp.
1% on the $100. And I kept trying to explain to George over and over. I even made a video with pennies and nickels and dimes to explain this, because either he's really, really dumb, or he's just locked in politically to the idea that this is a 1% tax increase. It's sad to think he has nobody around him who knows math, but you don't divide the dollar change in the cost of the lamp into the cost of the lamp. We're talking about the increase in the taxes. The tax was 7 3/8, or $7.38. It goes up $1 to $8.38. It's 1 into the 7 3/8,
No, I get
not
it.
1
I
into
know.
the 100. George didn't want to ever accept that. And like I said, I mean, somehow it managed. And by the way, that number kept shifting. And when
That
they,
changed in the zeitgeist, though. Even like the states calls it a 1% tax increase.
Well,
Even
but
the
that's-
state
but
does,
that- but-
which is the point.
But what's disturbing to me is not that politicians push out false narratives. That's what they do.
It's that the
okay?
press ate it and ran with it.
All of the press did. Okay, and so the only person who was honest in any way about it that I saw was Mark Langerello, where he rephrased it to say what it really was, which was, but not a 1% increase in the sales tax.
I actually meant I after you called me, I mentioned it on their show. And so I'm going to take a little credit for transferring that information to Mark but it was your quote.
But he was the only one.
I
The
gave
News
you
12,
full. I gave you
Fios,
full credit.
Thank you. The News 12, all the rest of them ran
There's
headlines.
a story in March I got to ask you because that horse. You're right, and it's okay. Here we go. Standard Amusements discloses investment by a company which plans to sell off Rye. That certainly has changed since then. What was that about?
Well,
they were going to sell it off?
Yeah, well, that was one of my bigger stories of the year, and it had a significant impact. People were telling me about this, and I did some research. I called the companies involved, and what was going on was the investment company was telling their investors that they were in a business deal that would allow them to acquire and then sell off beachfront property in Rye. Well, that's Rye Playland, and that's one of the things that was specifically not allowed under the deal with the county. So I went back to the county, and I asked them what about it. They didn't want to talk about it because they were trying to negotiate a separation from that company. But the company itself wouldn't admit to anything. Finally, I got a company representing the investment company to issue a statement. But I had all the information, and in fact, that's what they were apparently planning to do. The problem there was that they had a contract with the county that did not allow them to do that. So the fact that they were marketing the investment in their fund as we're going to make money off this deal in a way that they were not allowed to gets into an issue of fraud, right? And how they're raising money. It's nothing to do with Latimer or the county or Playland, but this company is making statements that are contradicted by the contract. And now it's not up to me to necessarily call it fraud. There's investigators for that, but it's a misrepresentation as best I can see.
Yeah, it makes
of what
sense.
they're doing. So that was a big deal. And that got, ultimately that whole thing got shut down anyway, but I thought that was a pretty bad thing to
I
do.
always wondered if that story actually helped the county in justifying walking away from the deal. They were no longer dealing with an honest broker.
I mean, in all fairness to them, their lawyers were up to their ears in negotiating the separation. I think
they certainly had to help.
They didn't. Well, they didn't want. The question for them was, how do you know about this?
Well, it's called due diligence. Last time I heard,
keeping my ears open. But like I said, they didn't really want to talk about it because they didn't want to get drawn into a public controversy because they were trying to separate from them anyway, which they did. But this was a pretty amazing thing for this
incredibly
investment
amazing
fund to do.
I'm sure we'll hear about that when they go to trial next month. Or we'll probably go to trial February. And Latimer mentioned today it's probably
all the more reason why they didn't want to talk about it. But we'll see what happens.
Hey, one of the stories that you did then, I mean, it reached other papers, and I was wondering if you had a follow-up. The two people that plunged through the guardrail, did they do so on purpose? Has that been considered a suicide? Do you know?
I have no information about that. The only story I know is that the guy, hit the gas and ran through the barrier down by the New Rochelle Harbor Police building. But why that happened, I don't know. I never heard anything about that. But obviously a tragic situation. And if you recall, they pulled the man out who was driving. They didn't realize until they pulled the car out that there was actually another body in the car.
Another body in the
wife.
car. Yeah. A lot of people were speculating. Former controller of College of New Rochelle pleads guilty to securities fraud and failing to pay over more than $20 million in payroll taxes. This was incredible stuff. What I couldn't figure out, this guy wasn't apparently benefiting from this. Why did he do it? Did we ever find out?
Well, he portrayed himself as sort of a fall guy for a broader set of problems at the school. I don't really know. I just know what happened.
At that moment.
Convicted. So,
yeah, that's a sad story.
And obviously it kind of tees up the fact of what happened to the school, and it was sold and all the rest of it, which I didn't really report on because I didn't feel there was a need to, because the folks at the Journal News were covering it very heavily.
Story, yeah.
So I have limited resources. So if they want to dive into that, I'll just link to their stuff and give them credit.
Westchester County legislator unloads on Westchester County police officer. Was this the Marr issue? Damon Marr?
Yeah, I was there. It was at a meeting of the Culture and Climate Committee of the New Rochelle Board of Education, and he stood up and gave this kind of diatribe going after this cop who was really not there for that. I mean, he was just invited to come talk about what was done in the program he was involved in, which is, I think, primarily up in Ossining. Not exclusively. I think they're in some other towns up there. But it was, sort of the grandstanding kind of thing that politicians tend to do. I think a lot of people questioned whether it was appropriate for him as a county legislator to be at a meeting like that, speaking out. I talked to Damon about it.
Mm-hmm.
Afterwards. I mean, it was kind of made a whole kerfluffle within the county government because people in his own party were upset with him, and they didn't want to be perceived as being anti-police, anti-county police.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Damon is on a committee for county safety, and so if he has issues with what the county is doing, the appropriate venue is to address it on his own committee.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
But no one ever accused Damon of being consistent.
Okay, we're moving into April now. We're with Bob Cox, managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. And we're going
by
through,
the way,
there were so many stories. I got to skip some. We're only up to April.
But it's not up to you to pick all the stories. So
well, I thought you wanted my reaction, but you tee him up.
Well, we can discuss it, but
go ahead.
Well, another one is that we're starting to see more and more of the swastikas. By now,
I did see
the
that.
High school.
Was this the beginning of the swastika?
Well,
or was
the first one I reported was November of 2018, but then it kind of heated up.
Did we ever catch any of the people who did this?
Well, no, and I wrote an article about that just over the weekend as to why we haven't caught anybody, which has to do with the fact that we do not have adequate CCTV coverage of our buildings. And this has been an issue that's been going on for 10 years. It's been discussed publicly, so I don't feel badly saying it. I don't want to get any specifics on where exactly and what school, but it's a well-known issue that we don't have enough security cameras. More broadly, we don't have anybody. So what I would say is, inside the buildings, we don't have full coverage. Outside the buildings, we don't have any coverage at most of the schools. And there isn't anybody sitting at a desk anywhere monitoring the video cameras in real time, like you would see at any place else you'd go, a shopping mall.
That's surprising in this
building.
day and age.
It's not surprising at all because the school district does not actually prioritize school security. Okay, so it's mostly used as a full employment program for local residents to get jobs, working for the school district, to get medical, to get pensions. It's more about who you're connected to. So one of the other complaints is that a lot of our, not all, because some of the security guards are people I know and respect, but there's a bunch of security guards who are, not physically fit, let's put it charitably.
How do they get these jobs?
Are not willing to intervene in any kind
What
of
do they get
situation. And if there was ever a school shooting, my God, the biggest risk would be that the students would be run over by some of these security guards trying to get out the door. So we've talked a lot for 20 years, really. Going back to Columbine, this community has talked a lot about school security and done almost nothing.
Well, how much do these guards make?
Well, most of them are full-time now, and they probably make about 40,000, 50,000.
They make that much?
I'm not sure exactly how much they make.
What are the requirements?
Apparently not much. You have to have a school security a security guard license from the state, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's civil service requirements. You're supposed to live in New Rochelle, although not everybody did. I reported on that too. But my concern is that over the past decade, because understand the timeline, we did we had Columbine that led to the creation of a law in New York State that was signed by Governor Pataki afterwards. Which was the SAVE law, School Against Violence in Education or something like that, but the SAVE law. And that required every school district to develop a school safety plan for every building, which was done in New Rochelle, and it was published in 2002, and then nothing was done about it until after Sandy Hook 10 years later. There was a security audit done in 2009. I have a copy of it. I've read it. It was done by two people who I would say are amateurs. One guy was a former administrator in White Plains, no particular background in security. I've reached out to him because I want to interview him about what he did in 2009, but it's a very lame report. But even that report identified problems with the technology, the cameras, and things like that. And after Sandy Hook, another report was done by a company called Vigilant Resources. Then another report was done.
Let me ask you something. Do they not... sometimes, much like when the lockdown was not observed, Do you think it's just laziness, incompetence, or do they not want that kind of oversight?
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well, why not do this? I mean, maybe it costs $1 million to wire up the schools. I don't know, but why not do it?
Put the cameras in where they should.
Yeah.
I mean, what I've been talking about for a long time.
I always try and find a reason for it.
So there was VRI, Vigilant did a report in 2013. Then last year we had Guidepost Solutions did a report. Then we had another report by Alterra. So that's 4 reports in 10 years, and very few of the things that have been recommended, in all of those have actually been done. But low-hanging fruit, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Video cameras is easy. They're relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
We already have a system, okay? So plugging in more cameras to it, hardwiring all the cameras back. One of the most ridiculous things.
They even have a lot of wireless cameras.
Okay,
Bob.
in the VRI report in 2013, it recommended putting door alarms on every door at the high school, so you know if somebody was opening the exterior, because there's a lot of exterior doors at New Rochelle High School. Okay, so what did they do? They put, no joke, battery-operated alarms, okay, that are not hardwired back to a central command station, and there's no video cameras pointing at those doors. So somebody opens the door, a beeper goes off, except if the battery's dead, which most of them are because they have no process to go through and check the batteries on a regular basis. And you might do something like that in your own home with a smoke alarm, but the idea that you're going to put battery-operated door alarms into a public high school, one of the largest, second largest in the state, is absurd. Okay, they obviously should be hardwired back to central command, and then there should be somebody there who's watching it all the time. In my article, I just recently pointed out, in the case of the stabbing with Brian Stamps, that happened at 8:36 a.m. The school didn't go into lockout until after 9 o'clock, and the reason was because it took that long for the police and school security officer to go through the videotape to figure out what had happened, where he had gone, and that he had in fact had left the building. Mm-hmm. Then they put the school on lockout. So it's about 20-something minutes that it took to figure that out. There should be somebody who's watching the monitors in real time so that the second something happens, they know that the kid left the building. They can go on lockout immediately. To wait 20 minutes when you have an attempted murder in the building, that's what was charged, is absurd.
I have a question for you in April. We were up to April, folks. We made it to April. But it's not a big story, but it jumped off the page at me because it involved the news. Westchester County set to acquire a local Gannett paper?
Well, did you check the date next to that?
April 1st.
Yeah.
You son of, Bob, really. I walked right into it.
The only one on the list with a date.
I walked right into it. Fine. Well, at least my news nose was, you got me. We're going to May now.
Well, okay, but before we go.
You're going to do every April story?
No, I'm just going to skim through and make sure we got the.
I did, folks.
I
walked
swastikas.
Right
into it.
Duh.
The issue came out about the failure to have enough instructional hours at 2 middle schools, which may cost the district $1 million in lost aid, and also the expansion of the Apex credit recovery scandal. At the time I reported the feds were looking at it, but I've since obtained emails that show that the county district attorney also asked to be read into the investigation last January. So more to come maybe on Apex. And in fact, I'll jump ahead. I found out in September that the district reopened the investigation, and then I got more information about what the investigation said. And then probably one of the most significant stories I did all year was I obtained a ton of documents from state records about what was happening with the investigation. Still no final report, but all the inside of what was happening day to day with getting access to records, dealing with the school district. And what it showed is that the school has lied about the Apex investigation many, many times. The former board president lied about it multiple times. And in fact, the investigation, is still, out there, ongoing. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. So we'll see. But if you've got the feds looking at Apex, and if you've got the district attorney, and you got the state looking at it, hopefully something will come out of it. But right now, I've been foiling. Nobody will give me the records of what the final report was from the state. So, but that was sort of the beginning of that. And I'm skipping all the crime stuff, but there was some big, crime stuff that happened. But then if you wanted to jump to May, go ahead.
Let's go to May. Yeah, Board of Ed and I News. I remember that. Yonkers teen pleads guilty to manslaughter and death of news. Let's talk about
So
that
some of
while I
those
swallow.
guilty pleas came. So this
This is before
was,
sentencing,
uh,
obviously. But she cut a deal, didn't she? What did she?
she got 17 years.
17 years.
Yeah, so
wow.
we'll see that come up in a little bit. But also in May, you had the school budget passed. You had the election of 2 new school board members. So that was significant. Now you'll see June is blank because I was in Saudi Arabia for most of June, and so
And we saw the news coming out of Saudi Arabia. Khashoggi was
no, actually,
Were you
when
involved
I was,
in that?
No, that was before I was there. But
my own April
what did
Fool's
happen
joke.
when I was over there was all hell was breaking loose in the Persian Gulf. You
Yes,
had
of course.
a couple of ships blown up, and you had some missile attacks from Yemen.
You and I like to talk about some of these international things. Did you know that there's actually a beef among or between the Arabs and the Persians? They feel it should be called the Arab Gulf. That particular Gulf, even naming it is at the heart of the split between the Persians and the Arabs and the Sunnis and the Shias. The Arabs want it to be called the Arab Gulf. Just a little bit of trivia for you.
Well, I have a little other trivia. You know that Saudi Arabia has been having a running fight with Qatar.
Yes.
Which just sticks
Qatar.
out into the
Into
water
the-
there, and
yeah.
it's like a peninsula.
Uh-huh.
So they actually announced a plan. I don't know that they're actively working on it. Their plan is to dig a canal from one end to the other in Saudi Arabia that would separate Qatar from the peninsula and make it an island.
Wow.
So they get kind of that way.
Now, just a little thing. I was, as you know, to do this kind of show, you do show prep way in advance of what you'll actually talk about, depending on what will happen. And I was reading a story last night you'd find interesting since you've been in Riyadh. One of the most expensive 2-hour flights in the world is the flight between Riyadh and Dubai on Sunday nights and Fridays, so Thursday nights. Because the jobs are so great in Riyadh, but the people don't like to stay there, so they stay in Dubai. $1,100 for $1,100. They're willing to pay it for a round trip ticket to go and come from Riyadh.
Well, I'm familiar with that because, as you know, my son lives
Yeah,
there.
I know that. I thought you get
And the big
find it
difference
interesting.
is if you're a young Saudi person and you want to get a beer and you
got to go to Dubai, yeah,
or Abu Dhabi, and so
Yeah,
Abu Dhabi is physically connected, and there's a bridge,
right.
and that bridge so the weekends are Friday and Saturday, right? Unlike here, so Thursday night is their
Right.
Friday
That's
night,
right.
and the bridge going to Abu Dhabi is bumper to bumper. It can take 4 hours to get across the bridge on a Thursday night, and similar bad traffic coming back. I've flown to Abu Dhabi. I wanted to skip the traffic. I was going there for a weekend myself. So flying is definitely better.
And the other thing is business and first class, you have to get them months in advance. Months in advance. You can do coach for $1,000 round trip 2 hour, and United Arab Emirates. What's Air Emirate, I think it is, or Emirates is the name of
Emirates Air.
Emirates, yeah, thank you. They're making money hand over fist. They even had to go fly Riyadh. They had to cut a deal with another one to fly Dubai or something to help them out. Just a little interesting stuff. Well, let's continue because I've got some extra time. We can go another 20 minutes here, and I'm interested in this. But I do need to take a quick break for the weather. And something that we do here, and we get paid to do it, so we love to do it. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. The temperature's 37. It chilled out a little bit right now. It's going to go up to 43 today, but it's raining off and on all day. Now, we've got a chance for slippery roads, Bob, if you get up above 287 or 84. Because of some wind chill, and that's 30 degrees. It'll feel like 30 up around those parts, particularly tonight. Rain showers toward midnight, and so that chance for icing conditions increases. It'll be 37 down here across the Sound, but likely colder north, so be aware of that. Tomorrow, New Year's Eve, partly sunny, highs around 44. Normal high equals 37 degrees. Wind out of the west-southwest, 5 to 15. And on Wednesday, New Year's Day itself, a mixture of sun and clouds. It'll be about 39 to 40. The overnight low will get down to 28. And as we continue our conversation with Bob Cox, we want to thank Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Pena and Kahn. and Plug-in Virtual Reality for their support. Now, we've been talking with Bob Cox, managing editor, publisher of Talk of the Sound, one of the people we had in mind when we created this radio station, because he does the heavy lifting, the deep dives into the local stories. And what we've been talking about is the top stories as he sees them, although I keep sticking my 2 cents in because it's so interesting. The top stories as he sees them throughout the year. And we made it up, I think, to June, didn't we? Or no, we just got past.
July.
Hold on. Oh, we're in July. Okay, we're at July.
But this is when they were published, so
Right.
we're in July, but actually the next big story is the hiring of the new superintendent,
Oh,
Dr.
this
Feo.
is going to be fun.
That was June 28th, so there's a whole series of stories. So that's certainly a thread.
And that thread will
Well,
continue for the next 6
So just
months.
for your listeners who just came in.
Who
so,
just joined us.
So the idea is that this is just a whole bunch of stories that I marked off that were month by month stories that I wrote, not necessarily, because if there was some other story that happened that somebody else wrote, it's not here, because this is about what we published.
Yes.
Not that they're not important. It's just this is just focusing on what we published.
And we're talking here, Talk of the Sound, managing editor, publisher, Talk of the Sound. Continue the source since
Right.
2008. Consider the source. Continue, sir.
Yeah. So in any case, this is a first cut. It's up on the website. If people have opinions, they're welcome to add them to Facebook or Twitter.
You know, we're going to add this to something we're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow, in fact, you see a stack right here. We have a lot of the different year-end lists, and you now made our year-end list, so we'll have some fun tomorrow. This is a great idea.
So from this, I will try to come up with a top 10. So I haven't come up with the top 10 yet. This is part of the
not gonna be
exercise
easy.
of doing that.
By the way, tell you what, I'll make some time for you tomorrow. You're going to call in. Now that people have heard this, what will be Bob Cox's top 10?
Okay, I'll send it
I'll
along.
get back to you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So obviously,
Da-da-da-da.
the hiring of the superintendent was a big deal that happened June 28th. That's when it was announced. And some other major things were that the guy who killed the woman at the armory was sentenced to 20 years to life.
Lock them up.
The big one for me, because I did all the reporting on it, was that the school district, the school board, hired an investigator to look into Jeffrey Hasty's phone bills, which he absolutely lied about.
Is that ongoing?
We haven't heard a resolution of it yet, but he ran up over $2,000 in charges for trips he took to Italy, to Africa. There's charges of $400 on a cruise ship. And he just lied about it. He lied about it on your old station with another host.
Mm-hmm.
And I pressed the issue for many, many months. And once he left, the board decided to hire an investigator. So there is also something I asked him to look into, which is I haven't reported on. But he wasn't the only one who was abusing the mobile phones. There was dozens of examples of that, and tens of thousands, if not six figures of money stolen, equipment stolen related to cell phones. The whole program was run very poorly. He's just one part of it. But the idea that the president of the Board of Education in Rochelle needs to be carrying a mobile phone on a cruise ship or in Morocco or in Turkey or in Italy because he's so important that he needs to be able to communicate instantly with everybody rather than say what I do with my son, which is we communicate on FaceTime for free. Okay, he had to be available, 24/7.
So your son has to look at your face in order to have a free phone
Well, there's
call.
an audio.
Now, there's a price for that.
There's an audio feature. Now, and of course, you're leaving off probably the biggest story that happened in August.
Bob, we do have a breaking story.
Yeah.
The coach of the Giants is officially dead. He's gone. Pat Schumer was fired.
He had that look on his face.
Yeah,
when they
according
lost.
to Jake just came back with the news, and it didn't come across our wire yet. Carter appears where he worships. God bless President DeSantis just came across the wire too. Carter is preaching at a church today. He's still alive. God bless him. Former President Jimmy Carter. Keep it up, Mr. President. Continue, Robert.
Well,
Sorry.
you forgot the most important news. Of
I
August.
saw it. I didn't want to.
Westchester media personality leaves terrestrial radio to embrace high-tech future. That is a story about our own Bob Marrone
That would be
doing
me.
what he's doing now.
Yeah, doing.
So
As you can see, we have a little trouble getting good guests, but other than that, we're doing fine.
Yeah, then
Well,
that's
thank you for
okay.
that. That was a nice piece, and we appreciated it very much. So we move on from July. That was a great story. Probably his number one story of the year, I would say. All right, Bob. No, actually, I want to take a little moment here. Because we're talking about July with so many different things. The HR director and then the New Rochelle School's HR director takes a six-figure settlement. Why was that person let go? That was a big story.
Well,
not as big as Marrone's future, but
no,
up
but
there.
well, there was an effort over the course of Jeffrey Hasty's time on the school board to basically get rid of everybody, and he was one of the people they got rid of. I mean, if it's funny, if you go back and look, my daughter graduated, and I have the high school yearbook from last year, and you look at it and look at the administration page, it's completely different. So he that was part of it, but also
more college books for you, by the way.
I mean, the HR director, Joe Williams, was somebody who should never have been in that position in the first place. I mean, I will tell you, because I talked to a lot of attorneys who sued the school district, and they loved Joe Williams because he invariably screwed things up when they were trying to fire people who should have been fired because he didn't handle the paperwork processing correctly. He made a lot of mistakes. You want somebody in HR who's got a real background in HR, preferably somebody who's got a legal background, because there's so much of a legal component to it. He was a high school principal. I mean, an elementary school principal over at Webster, and had been in other administrative positions. None of that prepares you to be an HR director. HR is a profession that people spend their whole careers in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you don't just throw somebody in there. And in fact, there was, people don't know this story, but I'll tell it now. What happened is that the board did not have any interest in him at the time for HR director. But Richard Organishak, the superintendent at the time, decided to give him the job. So he told Joe Williams that he was HR director, and then he announced it. And the board was very upset. They wanted to walk it back, but they felt that they couldn't for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that he was African American, and there was very few African Americans in top positions in the school district. And so basically Organishak jammed him up with Joe Williams, but they didn't want him. And that's coming from current and former school board members who were involved at the time.
You know what I find interesting, if I may?
By the way, that statement's going to make me a lot of enemies. So
no, but having an
true.
executive back, that's the biggest Coca-Cola truck I ever saw. Look at the size of that truck. Anyway, excuse me. That's I almost never look out the windows because I'm always thinking, but that truck was right in my face. A giant Coca-Cola truck just passed in front of the train.
Your new sponsor.
Yeah, I wish. All right. Every once in a while, you make a hire for political reasons, or you kick somebody upstairs coming from corporate America who's done too much for the firm to get rid of whatever. Maybe, possibly. But you're smart enough to surround them or give them a deputy that covers and makes up for their deficits. Why was that not done?
It's worse, actually. One of the guys that he brought on as his helper was actually somebody who had been investigated, and the charges were sustained of sexually harassing the treasurer.
That's like adding an accelerant to a fire, Robert.
Well, I mean, the positions are called confidential positions. So they actually made this person a confidential employee, meaning they could see all the personnel records for everybody else. But meanwhile, years earlier, they were actually for years banned from walking past the men's room on the second floor to not go further down the hall where the treasurer's office was. And this went on for years. And when I heard that Joe Williams made this guy his deputy as a confidential employee, I just shook my head because, I just only in New Rochelle. This guy should have been fired. Okay, but instead they're giving him access to all the personnel records.
Okay, there's a story in August that jumped off the page at me before. New Rochelle Board of Education votes no on SROs. And I didn't realize this till this very day, but yes on armed police in schools. What the hell's the difference?
Again, only in New Rochelle. So they adopted a policy that said that they were not going to have SROs, even though every time they brought in anybody to guide them and advise them on this, everybody recommended SROs. Now, I'm sort of agnostic on it. I don't think it's actually the most important issue in the school district, but people are very passionate on either side of it. But so they said they're not going to have SROs, but they agreed to have a program where a particular police officer would continue to mentor kids in the schools who would be an armed, uniformed police officer. So I asked board members, I said, well, okay, you're saying no, but then you're hiring this guy. and he's going to be in there with his weapon. And it's like, well, he won't be in there for the purpose of being an SRO. He'll be in there to be a mentor, and he'll only be allowed to go to the classrooms where he's mentoring the kids. And I'm like, but he has to get to the classroom by walking in the building and going through the hallway, and he's a police officer the entire time he's in the building. If he sees something, a drug deal, an assault, he's supposed to do nothing.
How many officers will be allowed in the school at a given time, did they say?
No, this is just one guy.
Just one guy.
Robert Johnson's is police officer.
Okay.
And but he's done a very good job. But this all became very political and nonsensical.
Well, I remember, we talked. I'll give you an example. In my old show, and I'll be getting him on this show soon after we finally do our grand opening and explode to the bigger format. We get the city manager, supervisor of Eastchester on. He said they've had SROs for years, no problems, no one's offended, and they're very comfortable. People feel safe. Why not do that? Why not have students feel safe? I understand the politics of it, but do people really believe it's going to be offensive to people having SROs in the school?
Yeah, I was there at the meetings. People are very animated on the topic.
But why do they think that?
Well, first of all, you should invite them on. Okay,
I'd love to
ask them that question directly, because the people who were against it, are very loud, very vocal, and they're prominent people in the community. So you can ask them. I don't want to.
What's your take?
Well, the number one consideration that they had was that it was going to create a situation where students would be afraid of the police officers because they'd be afraid of being arrested, the Black Lives Matter thing, seeing an officer with a gun. There might be incidents where something bad happens, where an officer, tackles somebody to the ground, or, arrests somebody and gives them a criminal record they wouldn't otherwise have, things like that. And sure, every time some story came out that was bad for SROs, there was like an incident down in Texas, there was a few other incidents. At Parkland, the guy who was the SRO basically ran away and was fired.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, so they would highlight all the bad examples, and they would ignore any of the good examples, because there has been good examples too. At the end of the day, I personally didn't think it was a big deal either way, because of something I mentioned earlier in the show. Okay, you have battery-operated door alarms. Okay, so our security in our schools, based on whether those double D or double C, double A batteries, or whatever they are still working. And so I'm not really worried about an SRO. When you fix all the other things that can be fixed, then let's have that discussion. To me, it was a classic example of how a few people wanted to distract attention away from, for example, what happened in January of 2018. As I've brought up many, many times, I gave a speech about it back in November. I've written about it over and over again. There has never been an investigation, and nobody has ever been held accountable for what happened in January 2018 with the murder of Valerie Schwab, with the stabbing in the high school, or any of it. No one's ever been held accountable. So I don't really care about the SRO thing when you're not taking care of that kind of stuff, because there are people that are employed by the school district who should have been fired on the spot, and they're still there in positions of responsibility. And so to me, the SRO was just kind of a red herring. Got everybody all worked up and excited. It was actually a done deal from the beginning. They were never going to do it.
I'm surprised that Valerie Schwab's family hasn't brought civil suits in this regard. For example, whose decision was it to let the kids out during the, those kinds of things?
Well, I talked to the family at the time, and the father had no interest in pursuing litigation. Why, I don't know, but that's what I was told by family members. And then the mother... I talked to a lawyer from Queens who said he was representing her, and he wanted to get information from me. But she's apparently kind of a messed up person. I don't really know anything about her, but the rest of the family doesn't think too much of her, and nothing ever really came of that either. So I really couldn't say.
Okay, we move into September. Although, no, I got to go. These stories are so rich. New Rochelle employees scammed Union Welfare Fund. How deep was that problem?
Well, there was the two people that were involved, and one of them was invited to not work there anymore, what I call unexpectedly resigned. Mm-hmm. The other person was kept, but then they ultimately got in trouble because they were then arrested by the district attorney's office, same person, for embezzling money from the youth tackle football program. This guy, Larry Alston, is alleged to have stolen $50,000. He's in the courts right now dealing with the DA, but he was the same guy involved in this. And that was two particular people. So that's different. Sorry, there was 10 people, current and former employees, who were filing for reimbursement from the welfare fund. The way the welfare fund works, for those who don't know, is that the government agency, like the city or the schools, gives money to a fund that's administered by the union. But it's actually the taxpayer money, and then people can get reimbursement for things like dental expenses, eyeglasses, whatever is allowed. Gym memberships, I think, was one for the city that you can get money back. Well, they had people that were applying and getting reimbursements that were entitled to that. Okay. Now, that should never happen because the union appoints a board that's supposed to oversee these welfare funds, but you know how that goes.
Yes, we do. Now, one of the stories, I got to go to this one in September because you inadvertently, we were all a part of this story, and we were not aware of it at the time, and that is the man arrested at the New Rochelle train station for making terrorist threats.
No, you were aware of it.
Well, I was aware of it, but didn't think anything of it because now I'm going to show you.
There's a guy out your window.
No, he was
carrying a bomb.
Now, I can see myself when I turn around on the monitor. There's a window here and a window here, folks. Okay.
A fake bomb, by the way.
No, and we had that day. We had donuts right out this window, the cupcakes rather, that we were giving out. Okay, bought by Pena and Con, by the way, and this man came up with this baseball jacket on. One of the ones that remember back in the day, they were kind of silky, fabricy, and he was a big, heavy guy. And he had taped all kinds of wires and stuff. And I actually made the joke because I was sitting this way then. And we reconfigured the studio. By the way, it's getting reconfigured again this coming weekend. So that people will actually be able to see you and be as frightened as I am right now. So anyway, I owed you that. So he keeps walking in the window and keeps eating all our cupcakes. So I said, look at this guy. I actually said on the air, look at him. He looks like he could be a mad bomber with all the wires hanging out. But frankly, he seemed harmless. So later in the day at 3 o'clock, it comes across on the monitor that he got arrested for having a bomb threat.
Actually, I sent you the story.
Yes. Is that how it was? Was it you? I thought it was up there. And no, that's right. It wasn't even.
Well, I sent you the story just because it was at the train station. You then responded saying, I saw the guy.
I said, I made a joke about it. I said, look, he looks like a bomber.
You're going to have to work on your news skills.
I am not looking. Thank you very much. Oh, you got even, huh, for that?
Well, when it walks right up to the window.
Fine. He did walk up to the window, and you did say that at the time, too. Great job, Bob, doing the news. But let me ask you, you were here we were all here that day. Did you think he was in trouble when he kept eating all your cupcakes?
He just looked hungry.
Yeah, he just looked hungry. Another news guy. We have a crack staff here at Radio
Well, as
West.
it turned out, he was, in fact, there was some kind of fake bomb, but
yeah,
still.
you had a picture of the paraphernalia that I see hanging from. In fact, I think I saw cupcake crumbs on it. All righty, Bob, you look at September now. What do you like?
No, that was September, and the other one that I started bringing up in September was about illegal fundraising and political activities.
Yeah, I
in
remember you
schools.
talked about it right here on the air.
And that's been going on for the past few months. They finally took one action, which is that they have banned teachers and staff from running concession stands out of classrooms, which is funny because you would think that they didn't need to have a rule against that. That would have been sort of axiomatic, but they did actually announce that they were going to. So they had some positive change there for that. And then October was about the campaigns, right? So there I was kind of mostly beating the heck out of Councilman Trangucci, who I'm happy to report is no longer on the city council or as of
Yeah, that was what you reported, that he
Wednesday.
took money from developers for his campaign, that he later returned. Or did he
that, but
return?
there was a bunch of other stuff. He was involved in a deal to get the hospital zoning reconfigured for the benefit of people who were donating to his campaign. The simplest thing I can say without going through all the stories is somebody who'd been around too long and was starting to feel a little bit too entitled.
Yeah, we said 12 years he was on the city council.
10, and also making, ironically, he was one of the people who talked a lot about term limits when he first got on city council, less so after he'd been there for 8, 9, 10 years. But he is actually the poster child for why you want to have term limits if you want to have them. I'm not a big fan, but because when people are there too long, they start to feel entitled.
I got to go back to that. You said something very interesting, and there was a great talk show host, McIntyre, and he was out. He used to do something called Red Eye Radio, and then he was the number one drive time guy in L.A. and he's a California guy, and he used to be for term limits until he saw how having term limits in California almost destroyed the state, because people would cut deals and then they weren't going to be around to answer for them. It's a whole nother part I never even gave a thought. What's your take on term
Well,
limits?
it's the same as anything. It's the same as, like, we have this discussion all the time about a strong mayor or a strong city manager form of government. There is no good form of government. There's good people and there's bad people. And so if you have good people in this form or that form, you're going to get good results. If you have bad people, you're going to get bad results. I think the one real thing that you do need in order to get good government is you need people that are acting as a watchdog on what they do and can expose them, and so that they become worried that what if what I'm doing becomes public. When they feel that they don't have to be accountable in that way, they're going to help themselves. The form of government, the term limits, how many people are on the school board or city council, none of that really matters. What really matters is that you have good people there and you have a system of checks and balances between the government and the media to keep an eye on things, and then you'll get good results. And
It's well put. It also is a good explanation for why you do what you do. We want to get to November. We have time to
well,
November.
don't forget the development commissioner.
How did I miss that?
So
No, wait. What month is that, though?
that's October.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, I did miss
So
that.
don't
We're going to
forget
talk
that.
about
We
that.
had-
Development women involved in elevator altercation with worker at Trump Plaza. It's 9:22. You're listening to Radio Westchester. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. We brought on Bob a little earlier today, and he's still going to be with us till about 9:30. So we got our hour in with him, and then we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. He's the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. And when we say considered the source, of doing the heavy lifting, the deep dives in New Rochelle and surrounding area news. And we're talking about his top stories. And tomorrow we're going to bring him on. Of all these stories we're talking about, plus the others, and there's a list. Go on the Talk of the Sound website, and he's got all these, what he considers his top stories each month. You may want to compare tomorrow with top 10. We're only giving him 10, and we're going to give him some time to come in and call his top 10 stories. And we are still in October. Go.
Well, so we have the Development Commissioner, Luis Aragon, was involved in an incident where he grabbed somebody and threw him out of an elevator. He was subsequently charged and then did a plea deal. He got a violation, which is parking ticket. I think there was some community service and a few other things. There is or will be a civil lawsuit, so this will still have to play out. But, a shockingly stupid thing. That's a story that we broke. I interviewed Luis. He actually called me to tell me what his version of events was. And he himself acknowledged that it was stupid. So, I mean, what else can you say? He did something foolish. I would say that he's been remarkably chastened by it. We'll see if that lasts. But a lot of people thought this would be grounds for getting rid of him. I think that's really to not understand what he's done for New Rochelle.
Yeah, I mean, really, over one mistake.
Well, I just think that it would be our loss. I mean, he's not
Yeah.
going to have trouble getting a job someplace else, but we would miss him. And so, not a good thing to do, but not a reason to get rid of somebody who's been very successful.
He's done more in his few years here than all the development commissioners for the last 10 or 15, 20 years. Incredible.
Well, in all fairness, there was another guy that preceded him, Michael Frameth, who actually laid the foundation for some of this
I did know
stuff.
Michael, yeah. He's the guy that fixed up Bridgeport.
Stanford
and Bridgeport, actually.
Yeah. And he went on to work up near
Where's he
Hartford.
now?
Up near
He's
Hartford.
up in Hartford now?
Working for some state agency up there. But, he did a good job, but then Luis kind of hit it out of the park. I think the biggest success that he's had is with the downtown overlay zone, which really led to a lot of development. Full disclosure, I live in one of the buildings, although my building was started before the downtown overlay zone. But
yes, he did put a new jail into just threw that in there. No, you know what? This is a compliment to him, and just to show you that what fairness is, at least in my mind. He and I, when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, we used to bang heads all the time, and he can be a bull in a china shop. But I got to tell you, I had lunch with him when I first came back to the city to do mornings and WVOX and to run the chamber, and he told me about these giant kiosks that will do this, that, and the other thing. He told me about new bus shelters. He told me about ways to put zoning in that would do thus and such. And a lot of people in politics do that. You know, you do the same work I do. In fact, you do it to a greater depth. And to actually look out this window and see the actual kiosk that he talked about and see the bus shelters, the guy's done a great job. Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, no, I think it's he's been the most successful commissioner of any kind that we've had that I can think of in decades. So that said, I mean, all
right. Well, we're in November now.
Well, I would add one other thing, which is we had the case where
you're going to have a hard time picking your 10 stories. Let me tell you.
Well,
don't start yet. Okay.
Well, the high school social studies teacher who was arrested for sexually abusing a 15-year-old girl at the high school. There was additional charges added, 5. I think there were 5 rape charges.
Oh my God!
Because he took her back to his apartment in White Plains. So that happened in October. I mentioned the CCTV cameras. I wrote about that because of a statement that the superintendent made. She was responding to me, actually, inquired about the 19th swastika. There's now 20. And she said, basically we're going to find the person who did it and hold them accountable. Well, there's been 20 swastikas and nobody's been held accountable. Okay. There's also been a series of other incidents with fire alarm pulls so that the kids are being, forced to go outside in the bad weather during exams and things like that. And I would add this to it as well, and I would add the doors as well, which is how can a student be sexually abused in the high school and there's no video of it?
Well, we go back to square one on this issue. They need to have the video, Bob.
Right. So
we got about 5 more minutes, so let's get to November.
Well, the big one actually was October 31st. The girl that was nearly killed by the tree falling.
Do we know how she is now?
She's recuperating. That's all I know. The guy from NBC did a lot of good reporting on that, so I'd have to check and see what he's got on that. But she was hospitalized in very serious condition. But the reporting I did was, what's been going on with the trees. And what I reported later was, and the city provided all the records, that the city had been pushing Con Ed, for quite a while to get that tree taken down. Con Ed has to cut it first, cut where the wires are, then the city takes down the rest. And even up until that morning, they had been complaining to Con Ed about what's going on. So, it's a major failure by Con Ed. But it also raised a broader issue. I haven't written about it yet, but I did gather the information, which is, what is the deal with tree removal in our city? Because I'll share with you one thing that came out already. So when I got the record of how many trees were on the list that the city maintains that need to be taken down, this was a list I got in November 2019. And there was trees on that list from 2017. So people are waiting 2 years to have trees taken down. And that brought up a whole other issue, which is that we have this program to plant trees. But we don't really have an effective program to take down trees. And it would seem to me that you don't want to have just a one-sided program where we're planting more trees.
Has the story resulted in any action?
Well, I haven't written the story yet.
Okay.
So when I write it, I looked at it kind of like the Salt Dome stories I did a couple years ago, where they never wanted to spend money on the Salt Dome because each year it didn't seem economical. But I ran all the numbers. I interviewed Dr. Salt, as he's known. His name is Dr.
Salt.
His actual name is Dr. Morton.
Get out of here,
no,
really?
His real name is Dr. Morton.
Dr. Morton Sodium.
But I talked to vendors who supplied salt domes, and I ran all the numbers. And I said, look, if we put up a salt dome, we can buy one that's movable. So if you move the city yard, you can move it. But after about 3 years, the economics are it will pay for itself. But in the meantime, you'll also get much better salt spreading on the streets and safer streets and all the rest, which you really can't calculate the value of. And so they did ultimately buy a salt dome. And ironically, it's been there the whole time. They've never moved the city yard. So now they're way in the black on the salt.
So there you go.
So I think that similarly, there's just what's happened sometimes is that if you're working on a city budget, you're thinking 1 year at a time.
Of course.
And it's very difficult sometimes to think out over a period of time and get things through because people are going to complain. Why are we spending, $300,000 on a salt dome?
It's so true.
Well, because in 10 years we're going to make all that back and more. Well, people don't
care about 10 years from now. All right, we're going to put November and December together because we've got exactly 4 more minutes. So do your best.
Well, the football state championship, obviously.
Well, the coach was the big story.
So football state championship. But then parallel to that was the whole situation with Coach D. Obviously we're getting into November. We had the actual election, so we have now a majority of women on the city council for the first time that anybody I've talked to can seem to recall. There was a lot of animosity directed at the school board and the superintendent by both the Fuse Union, the black community, and all the football parents tied into various elements of this stuff. I think for me, the biggest story I did in that regard was I found out that the Yonkers police were investigating criminal allegations against the coach, which ultimately were not pursued. But that was a pretty big story at the time and dropped right in the middle of all the rest of what was going on. Any case, so then the
football team winning is a big
story. And that was a big deal. And a sad thing because they won, and in all the celebrations, the board members and the administration, superintendent, weren't part of that.
Now, they weren't part of it because they would have been booed off the podium.
Yeah, that's just a sad commentary on where we are. One that I liked, which we talked about, was a bunch of Gambino crime family members and associates were indicted in racketeering, including a Rochelle guy who's on my naughty list, let's say. So happy to hear that.
By the way, those comments are coming from Bob Cox, not Bob Marrone. Don't go by the first name. It's COX.
Thank you.
And I see. I don't like this. This could be like the what do you call it, Bob? The single bullet theory. He's right in line.
Don't give him any ideas.
Go ahead.
And then we had the school district reopening the search for a high school principal. So there's been an interim there since 2008. Hopefully they'll finally get somebody by the summer. You had Jared Rice appointed as mayor.
As a judge
by the mayor.
Taking his mother's job.
There's a bunch of things I did that were more deep dive stuff, which I can't really get into in this short amount of time, but about things like the school buddy program and other ways in which the school board has been out of control over the past 2 years.
Here's your challenge. Tomorrow.
And that's it.
Well, we'll be calling you. But that's not 10. That was like 87 stories. Tomorrow, I'll call you up later. We'll be in touch. We'll give you a time. You'll have 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes to give us your top 10.
Well, and I want to be clear. So those are all articles, but they're not necessarily a story.
I got it.
So a story is
could be
the
3 articles.
The hiring of the superintendent is a story. The Coach D situation is a story. It evolved over time. There's a bunch of stories about it, but that's what I need to figure out. What are the 10
You've got some
biggest?
homework to do now.
And if people want to comment, you go on my Facebook. You can add to there.
Well, let me remind them. First, what we recommend you do, and again, our guest has been Bob Cox, managing editor, publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. He has gone through all 12 months of the year with the top stories in each month, at least, and the ones that interested me for whatever reasons my tiny brain works. But tomorrow, he shall be back on the broadcast and give you his top 10, because tomorrow we'll be doing a lot of retrospectives, but as the first local news guy to appear on this station, and whom we had in mind from the day we came up with this idea. Bob, again, we'll see you again tomorrow, or at least have you call in, whatever works for you. But thank you for your contributions as we've done our pre-super grand opening. We're still waiting for the city to tell us. It has been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your contributions as well. Behind the scenes, Bob has given us a lot of advice as well. Thank you very, very much. We wish you and your family, even though we'll see you tomorrow briefly, we have more time now, a very happy and continued success in what
All
you're
right.
doing.
Well, thanks for having me and having me on the air. And, of course, I was banned on other airwaves. And so I'm happy that you're the home of free speech in New Rochelle.
That's what we're here for. Thank you very much. And again, we had you in mind from the get-go. I think I told you even before we did this. All righty, we're going to take a break and then tell you what we're going to be up to tomorrow. It is 9:35. We went a minute over, but it's worth it. Let's take a look at the weather. It is 37 still. It's raining off and on throughout Westchester, getting up to 43 today. But the rain off and on, heavy at times. Now, here's the real thing. As we get into tonight, they're saying that wind chills and then dropping temperatures into the mid-30s may create icy conditions north of 287 and north of 84, so please drive carefully. Tomorrow, Tuesday, partly sunny with highs around 44. The normal high, 37 degrees. The wind out of the west-southwest, 5 to 15 miles an hour. And for New Year's Eve, for those of you headed to White Plains or down to New York, and we've got a comment about that, you have a chance for a stray flurry. But otherwise, it's going to be about 32. Not too bad. And for the first day of the new year, a mix of sun and clouds. The temperature rising up to about 40. But it'll be chilly at night, getting down to 28. This weather was exclusively brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. This hour has been brought to you by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, Dominic's Fine Cigars, who brought you Jake's Mediocre Picks today. Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrones, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located at 204 Boston Post Road in Larchmont, open 7 days. Now, they're going to support the playoff picks as well, and then we'll do something special for this Super Bowl. And don't forget, plug in virtual reality. Hey, I got to show Bob these pictures too. We were talking on the air about I pitched in an alumni game and hit a few years ago, and we played in a professional ballpark. That's what I looked like, trying to throw a baseball and trying to hit a baseball. So anyway, see, folks, look, I actually did really do that. Bishop Ford High School alumni game. Although, you know what the shame was? Here I was like 60, 58, whatever. And these kids, they still had the kids that graduated like last year. I threw it in one of their heads, but that's all right. It didn't get there. It wouldn't have hurt a fly. Anyway, Bob, thank you very much for being here. Now, tomorrow, the NYPD plans a massive deployment of thousands of police officers to Times Square for New Year's Eve. Authorities have noted the police department has refined and embellished its security plans for the Midtown celebration in the past 4 years. So you should expect to be safe. Now, they do have certain weapons and metal detectors and things like that. Now, tomorrow, we have a number of things that we want to do talking about the year end. We'll have a full 4-hour show. We're going to talk about things that set records in baseball throughout the years, in hockey throughout the year, and moments of the decade. Think of Manning to Manningham. Think of Linsanity. Think of all those things. Think of people that left us. And as you know, we opened up the show today, sad story and we all have our heroes for good or ill. Mine was Don Imus and a bunch of other radio people. But in terms of mixing serious interviews with fun, he was our inspiration. We'll also be talking a little bit tomorrow about something that we really should focus on in the new year, folks. They're starting to do studies. Distracted driving is now the leading cause of fatal crashes. It's not even drinking and driving anymore. Texting. And another thing they mentioned that's very interesting, and I know I've been guilty of this one, thinking I'm cool because I won't text. Trying to get the Bluetooth operating to get your phone into the car or look at Facebook or whatever, or whatever different, I don't mean Facebook, or maybe it's Netflix or whatever, or listen to it. People are trying to access these things while they're driving. These are all big causes. We'll be talking about Trump's tweets tomorrow, some of his more famous tweets. One he had to pull the other day, he broke the law. I don't think he was aware that he broke the law. He outed the whistleblower, and then he had to pull the tweet off. We'll be talking about that. Getting out of jail freebies tomorrow. I want to go to jail so I can get a 7-day unlimited Easy Pass, a nice flip phone, and even some coffee. these allures to get me to come back to jail. So, well, at least to come back and get noticed for my hearing. And lastly, tomorrow we're also going to talk about that Navy SEAL. It turns out that one of the guys that the president pardoned, his fellow SEALs have broken their vow of silence to say that there was something wrong with the guy, that he was evil almost. And we'll talk only a little bit about that. Tomorrow's going to be mostly a year in retrospective. And a story we never got to today because we waited and the waiting was worthwhile. We notified you today that indeed Schumer is gone. And this was after he got high praise from the quarterback.
The senator or the coach?
The coach. The senator. Nice call, Bob. Anyway, so we're going to do all that tomorrow. We will have some of our regular guests, but we'll have them a little on shorter leashes tomorrow. I can't wait to talk with Mike Duffy because Mike always adds leavening and leverage. He's a pro-Trump guy, although not unreasonably so. He's a defense attorney. He's also a former investigator for the DA's office in New Rochelle. We've got to get out of here a little bit early today. It is 9:41. You've been listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone here on Radio Westchester. Thank you so much for listening. We are the station at the train station. And by the way, that thing, he probably should have copyrighted it. We copied that from Bob's article. We had another term for it, but when we heard that, that's part of our brand now. We are this radio station at the train station. For all of our guests today, and especially for our temple of mediocrity when it comes to picking football games, but he says he's going to have a nice nice playoff at Super Bowl.
I just want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Let me put these mics on so you can, go ahead. The temple of mediocrity has
The
a different-
criteria should be, if you bet $100 each game, are you making money?
Well, we're going to ask you that.
Why they have
You
the
made
answer.
money? You did make money.
Yeah, well, that's
You won how much?
400 big ones.
on that schedule and on that scale. So I would just point out to you that
But,
that's my
please take a
criteria for
seat.
gambling.
No.
Am I making money?
No, but you know what? And I've often said that this is an investment opportunity.
It's hard to pick against the spread. Mike Francesa was like 8-25.
Well, let me just tell you, I
Against the
want to
spread.
make, I don't want to be like others. I've always prided myself on admitting when I'm wrong on the air. I was wrong. You made $400. You know, people invested in the stock market don't make $400 in what, a 6-month season. So congratulations. And that's with $10 bets. I mean, he did pretty good. So I was wrong. You're not a temple of mediocrity. You are a temple of moderate success. All right. But
I'll take that.
But it's not over yet.
Most gamblers lose.
This is, I'm being ganged up on. Look at, he's got his Milwaukee hat, and you've got your Super Bowl. Oh my! When we beat the Pats, I like that. I like that a lot. By the way, I did a story today I'm going to get emails about because I defended. I don't like the Pats like everyone else. I don't like all this stuff, the cheating they do, but I could care less that an 85-year-old guy went and got a happy ending. I mean, it was illegal, but what's the big story? It's immoral. Good grief.
Sex trafficking?
Massage.
That part of it, you're absolutely right. If it involves sex trafficking, he shouldn't be doing that.
Usually does.
And what if someone does it willfully?
I think that the allegation there is that this is a sex trafficking issue.
Oh, if it is, then I stand corrected. Once that's 2 hours and 10 minutes, I stand corrected. Thank you, Robert. Now go. Bob Cox, everybody, managing editor, publisher, and he does have a sense of humor. Many of you think he doesn't. Jake Schaefer, the temple of moderate success. Thank you both. This is Radio Westchester. We're going to take our leave. Thank you so much. It's going to rain a lot, but please, if you're driving tonight and the temperature drops and you're north of 287, be careful. Black ice can kill you. And that story will enhance a little bit tomorrow. If you're going to listen to something, you're going to listen to your favorite podcast like us on RadioWestchester.com or MyTuner Radio, or we're now on iTunes or Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Periscope. Set it up in the car before you go. Yes, Robert?
And I actually have been able to get it to work on Alexa.
On Alexa now.
It's a little tricky right now. I know that you're working on a simpler way, but you have to say, Alexa, play westchesterradio.com on MyTuner, and it'll give you a selection of stations to pick from. And my English isn't always clear. My diction's not always clear, but usually you come up as one of the choices.
Oh, thank you. By the way, MyTuner sounds kind of kinky. But anyway, go to MyTuner, and many things will come up. Thank you so very much. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 6:11.